starting a program called Simply Cups.
What I was going to do is put the cup in the tube here.
We started Simply Cups in 2014 really to provide a solution for the billions of cups that are currently either being sent to landfill or incineration.
Well, hello and welcome to what is now the 4th annual Simply Cups conference. And what we hope today will really be a celebration of all of our achievements over the last 4 years. Before we start, I'd like to offer my thanks firstly to all of our sponsors who've assisted us in putting on this event today. Our headline sponsor, Sodexo, as well as A Short Walk, Costa, Leafield Environmental, Simply Waste Solutions, Regency Design and Print, and Wybone. Your support is much welcomed. Secondly, I'd like to thank what is a pretty stellar lineup of speakers that we've managed to gather here today. So I'd like to thank them for taking their time out of their diaries and coming and joining us to provide their insights and thoughts as well. And finally, I'd like to extend my thanks to every other attendee. We've got nearly 200 delegates here today, which is fantastic. And whether you're a Simply Cups member or not, it would be great to share how we've progressed and our plans for the future with you today. And we'd also like to welcome those of you watching on what we've called Simply Cups TV. I believe we have a live feed around the world. I know some of my Australian counterparts will be long into the night tonight, so thank you if you've managed to stay up with us, and I hope you enjoy the next couple of hours. So, in moving to the agenda, we're split into 2 sessions. The first session will start shortly with a keynote address from Lucy Siegel, who we're delighted to have here today with us, who will then share what we've called the big debate, which will then be followed by a Q&A in which everyone will get their opportunity to ask their questions to the panellists. In session 2, we'll have insights and updates from some of our key partners and supporters, as well as sharing some of our plans for the Simply Cup scheme in 2019. We will then end with a presentation by Douglas Master, award-winning chef and zero waste pioneer, who we've done a lot of work with, who will present his menu from waste, which will also be accompanied by a special range of cocktails which have been prepared to us today by the world-renowned Mr. Lyon. So, before and at the point when we launched Simply Cups in 2014, the overriding bit of feedback we got was that it couldn't be done. However, with hard work, passion, and a vision of what could be achieved, as well as the support of all of our collaborative partners and members, we have collectively proved them wrong. When we started in 2014, no cups were being recovered or recycled. Today, I'm delighted to say that the Simply Cups scheme is recycling and recovering 25 million cups every year. When we started, there were no businesses collecting cups. And again, I'm now delighted to say that there are over 100 businesses who have joined the scheme and who are actively contributing to those figures. When we started, there was certainly no products being made from used cups. And if creating value is one of the key things to solve this problem, then we're now delighted to say that we've launched this year the world's first reusable cup made from used cups, which Dan will come on to talk about a bit later on. And whilst, I suppose, our biggest critics at the start who said it wouldn't happen, we were interested to find out that there are now over 18 waste management companies who are allegedly recycling cups through their own means. So I think it's fair to say that we've succeeded in stimulating the market. At the start of every conference, we've come up with a line that, something that we believe passionately in, that waste is a failure of a system. Well, 2018 was certainly the year where the purported global recycling systems really collapsed. The end of export markets for low-value commingled material means that the rationale for Simply Cups and similar schemes is as stronger than ever. But when I joined Simply Cups in 2010, I remember in my first meeting with Rob, our founder and chief exec, telling me that there would come a day when we would not be able to sell disposable packaging without firstly demonstrating how it will be recovered after use, and secondly, how it will be turned into something useful. Whilst industry and governments have largely shelved this in the too difficult box for the last 17 years, I suggest that we've now reached that day. So having taken my inspiration from Rob, I'm delighted that in 2017, when Australia became the first country outside of the UK to launch the Simply Cups scheme. And I'm also delighted that Rob has recorded his own message and welcome to the event today, as well as providing a brief update on Simply Cups in Australia.
Hi guys, and from Australia, where we're sitting in 32 degrees, I don't think you are over there. Welcome to, from our part of the world, welcome to the fourth conference on Simply Cups. Now, it only seems like 5 minutes ago I was sitting here talking to you in the magnificent venue you had down in Cornwall, and now you've come up with another great one, thanks to Peter and James and the guys. The Crystal is the future of sustainable cities, obviously, and particularly we think that well emulates what we're doing with Simply Cups, or more particularly what you are. I was so rapt to hear from Peter that you've got over 180 delegates coming along this year, and of course the wonderful Lucy Siegel is going to be talking, and I love listening to Lucy talk about, particularly around sustainability and how it's not a negative, it's a positive, and how when we all band together we can do some really positive things. So well done, guys. I would like to tell you that over here in Australia, we're trying as hard as we can to emulate you. We're a long way behind on the number of cups that we've been able to collect, but we're certainly growing exponentially as you are over there. We've got some major brands that have come on board. Last year I told you about 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven have just doubled the number of stores that they are going to be collecting cups from, so we're going to be up to almost 400 stores that we're collecting their own coffee cups from, and of course collecting them from a lot of the offices and buildings and so on. We've got some other major brands over here. Muffin Break, which is one of our large coffee retailers in shopping centres, have come on board as well this year, and we've got some major brands that we're doing some trials with that are about to come on board early in the new year. So next year I'll be able to tell you some more exciting developments, but really today is about thanking you guys, thanking you for all your support. We couldn't do this without each of you, 180 people, that's amazing. And I think everybody that's there is contributing amazingly to the future of Simply Cups. So thank you, enjoy the cold weather over there, happy Christmas to you all.
So, whilst it's fair to say that Simply Cups has provided the disruptive innovation to undoubtedly stimulate cup collection in the UK, let's be frank, there is still so much more to be done. Much more needs to be done to increase the uptake of reusable cups, and much more needs to be done to recover and recycle those which remain. Whether we use the 2.5 billion cups per annum, which we at Simply Cups came up with in 2014 as the benchmark, it's evident that 25 million cups is great, but it is only a start, and it can only be the start. And on that note, I'm delighted to welcome Lucy Siegel to the stage, who I'm sure we'll be able to introduce for those of you who don't know Lucy. Lucy will not only provide our keynote address today, sharing her experience in communicating both environmental and ethical stories, but then host a panel of esteemed panellists to provide their own thoughts and debate what they see as the solution to the current problem. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lucy Siegel to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you for that very generous introduction. Delighted to be here today. I didn't realise we were going to be on telly in a live feed scenario, so I would have brushed my hair. Gosh. Okay, so I'm going to talk really fast, which I naturally do anyway, because we've hardly got any time. We've got so much to get through, and there's so much to say about this topic. So I've been asked to really talk a little bit about the communication side, as Peter said, and I detect, and I know it to be a fact, that we are holding a little bit of understandable resentment about some of the media coverage of is that fair to say? Hands up and be honest, be really honest. If you have been disappointed or read something about this subject where you've thought, if you feel like you're sort of pushing a boulder up a hill. Now no one's going to say, yes, thank you. Yes. Oh yeah, like everybody. Good. Okay. So I'm not barking up the wrong tree there. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about as we go through this, and I'm not here to apologise for the media, whatever that is. And I'd also like that kind of term in and of itself is becoming increasingly redundant because the media is not what it was. It's not the homogenised system of control with papers of record and all the rest of it. So I think we need to understand that we are throwing out our narratives into a very busy space, let's put it politely. And the less polite analysis would be that there's a lot of fake news and that there's a lot of stuff powering media cycles, which frankly has no connection to the reality of life, let's put it that way. So we're in a difficult space. We're also in a space with a lot of transition, and we are, of course, running old-style media, which we know as mainstream media, alongside new media, which brings a lot of opportunities, but it also means that we lose control. One of my observations around this area, so just to give you a little bit of background, and don't worry if you don't know me and you don't know me from Adam, because I've been on TV as a reporter for many years, but when I go to weddings, or when I go to anywhere. Well, actually, people often say to me, were you at my sister's wedding? Which is where most people think they know me from. So it's absolutely fine. I've managed to operate at a sort of low-level status, which is fine with me, because I think that reporters should be reporters. And one of the things I like to do is get out and amongst the story. Now, the reason that I've been interested in plastics for more years than I care to remember, and don't lie, some of you have been there with me, for many years, is because I suppose I have always taken the adage, which I think is a direct descendant of the Watergate scandal, which is follow the money, and I always thought it was far more interesting to follow the oil. And that's, for me, where you get environmental justice stories from. I specialised in environmental and social justice from the start of my career, really, which was around 2004, when I became a freelance writer. And around 2005, 2006, I think there was huge movement, not just around plastics or resources, really. We weren't really talking about plastics per se. We were talking about all resource consumption. But also, remember, then we were talking about stuff like carbon budgets and, stuff that looks completely revolutionary now. And it's hard to believe that was ever sort of on the table as any sort of possibility. So we know, if we've been doing this for a while, and I don't want to sound like an old timer, but we know that there are cycles to how this moves in and out of the public consciousness. And in the last year, I think it's fair to say that we have undergone this extraordinary bubble of attention we've been through, and you will have felt the hot glare of public attention. Anything which contains a fragment of plastic, that's true to say, whatever you're manufacturing, but particularly packaging, and of course the backstory of China essentially shutting its doors to low-grade waste has meant that the playing field is altered. So, we've got this this kind of hot light of scrutiny. We've had what has been called a public awakening, which I don't think is too over the top to describe it as that. Whether you attribute that to Blue Planet or whatever, a lot of people do, that's interesting in and of itself. So basically, that's where we kind of get our mandate for. I'm going to fly all around these slides, so just, ignore them for now. My slides, by the way, are not very good, but I'm very enthusiastic, so I'm hoping that compensates in some way. So this is how I look most of the time, or I have done over the past 6 months. So the vest is okay, the hard hat's okay, the goggles, I mean, they're just awful, aren't they? They're just horrific. No one can pull off the goggles. So you're lucky today, because I'm not wearing the goggles. So this has essentially been my life. So I have been up and down the country to pretty much every sort of recycling facility. If you run a recycling facility and I haven't been there, I'm sorry, but you obviously pretended you weren't in or you didn't invite me. But so we've tried to look at what's going on. And I work for The One Show, which I didn't say, which is a magazine programme on BBC One at 7 p.m. If you haven't seen it, it's because you are busy, or you've got small children, or you watch Emmerdale. Whichever one of those is appropriate, that's fine. But we've been on air for 11 years, and I've pretty much been there since the start. And again, the cycles have moved in and out of talking about plastics to this year, where we have done more plastics films than in any other time in our history. And what's important to remember is that any reporter, journalist, however, a contributor to a show, we don't say what goes on air. We have to sell these stories into layers and layers of commissioning editors. And it's a very complex process. So one of the takeaway points, and I will try and bring out some takeaway points, is that if you are frustrated that your narrative is not getting out there, you need to make it easier for us to sell. We're just salespeople, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go along, but I get a lot of emails, maybe I'm up to 100 plus a day, from people saying, I've got the solution. They're not to global warming, it's never global, but perpetual motion and energy. I get a lot of those. And I get a lot of people who have the solution to the plastics crisis. Lucky them. And then they get increasingly upset because their solution is not being heard. And, it is fair to say that in the media cycle that we work in, it's very difficult to take a story higher up the chain and get it profile unless it's got some key ingredients, which we'll discuss in a minute. Okay, so this is not even in focus because it's gone too big. But this is basically Stella McCartney's advert from a couple of seasons ago, because I also write about the fashion industry. So you might think it's a bit eccentric that I specialise in plastics and fashion, but there you go. And as we know, the two are aligned, which we'll also talk about in a minute. So fashion, in a way, has got some similar issues. If you think of it as an entire industry, reputationally and risk-wise, it's become really kind of problematic for fashion, because one of the things that we're starting to realise is that it's got a massive carbon footprint, and that we've got a real waste problem, like a massive, massive waste problem. You can see some of the stats here, but it's kind of similar to plastics in a way, and single-use plastics, that with the plastic that we're pushing out in terms of packaging, pushing it out on the world, is not going to be used in a year's time. But we can also say that about clothes, which is kind of an extraordinary position to be in. So there's a lot of modelling going on around the fashion industry. The UN is bringing out a fashion charter next week, I think. So there's a lot of energy. There's an environmental audit committee piece of work going on at the moment. I gave evidence to it a couple of weeks ago. So there's a lot of attention here. So I know it's easy to feel like plastics is the only focus, and I do hear from people who are like, why are we being picked on constantly? It is happening with the groups that are perceived, with the industries, the sectors that are perceived as having waste problems that are growing. And this is the important thing, obviously, to remember with plastics, is that, we have that statistic from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. By 2050, there'll be more pieces of plastic in the ocean than fish. And fashion's similar statistic, it's going to be responsible for 1/4 of all carbon emissions by 2050, which would be an incredible situation to be in that nobody would thank the industry for. Okay, so another thing with fashion, getting mixed up between fashion and plastics, is that this year I haven't just written about plastics, I haven't just talked about plastics. One of the issues that I keep getting asked to cover and keeps being commissioned is the burning of clothes. So there have been several brands that have been connected to the incineration of products which, for whatever reason, are no longer sellable on the market. And this incineration, when you're producing over 150 billion new garments a year from virgin resources, as we now think the fashion industry is, you could argue that incineration is part of the answer to that problem, okay? If you're just looking at it in a purely pragmatic level. The issue comes that incineration of clothing has absolutely zero approval rating, not just amongst consumers who go nuts for this story because they absolutely hate this. And they see reading this story as an act of activism, like saying how much they hate it. It has zero approval rating, not just with consumers, but also with investors. All of the big stories that have come out this year about fashion being burned have been leaked to the press by investors and the investor community. Okay, so I think that's a really important thing to understand where some of these stories are generated. And we know the backstory, which is also there's a similarity to plastics. We know that there's pollution, ongoing pollution, and that the legacy of these industries is not one that has any consumer acceptance either. So just a little bit of insight, it's been up and down the country. There's several things that have been said to me this year that have never happened before. So I've never had so many people burst into tears talking to me, and it's not just my interviewing technique or style. It is because they feel so deeply moved by plastics. And I can understand that if you work in a manufacturing industry where, it's about other things. I grew up, I'm the daughter of sausage makers, okay? You can interpret that how you like. But both of my parents worked for Walls. I know about food manufacturing. I know about factories. I've, waited for my dad for hours at work. So I know about how production lines work. And I know that these are not places that are invested with emotion. So I understand that you're working in quite a siloed kind of industry. You're doing your best to get the greenest, cleanest, lean manufacturing, whatever. And then basically this awakening happens as a spotlight on your industry, and you get all of this emotion because the plastic pandemic from Blue Planet onwards has been very emotional for lots of ordinary members of the public. And that must be very, very weird. I always think when we're taking crying consumers to recycling centres, how weird for the people working in the recycling centres. But at the same time, they are people too. So we all feel similarly. I don't think there is one person here, but do correct me if I'm wrong, who is comfortable with a legacy, like we have the Stone Age, the Iron Age, the Bronze Age. We're going to be the Plastic Age, which will, as far as we're sort of starting to understand and model, involve leaving a layer of plastic across the earth. Does anybody feel that's okay? No. I mean, and if you do, you're being shy about it, which is good, because you should be. So there's lots of different points of entry. And, I've had people come up to me, they've been crying because of the legacy they're leaving their grandchildren. They are viscerally moved by waste on a beach, plastic waste on a beach. And of course, these are the macro plastics that everybody can see. And then you factor into it, the statistics around microplastics, 51 trillion in the oceans and stuff like that. And it almost becomes a problem of such great magnitude that people start to get very panicky about how they are going to deal with it. So my job has been really to say, calm down, believe it or not. So although the media gets accused of whipping this up into a frenzy the whole time to sell papers, and honestly, I can really tell you hand on heart, I come from the newspaper industry. It's really hard to sell papers, and putting a story about plastic pollution, it doesn't guarantee sales, honestly. It doesn't guarantee sales. There's different motivators, and of course, there is no doubt that there is a body of public opinion that is very, very invested in this subject. One of the great plastic researchers, I can't remember his name, Eric von Sibley, who has done a huge amount of modelling on plastic in oceans as well, recently said we shouldn't be talking about plastic all the time. We should be talking about climate change. And there's such a truth in that. I mean, you know, climate change, the defining issue of our time. You got two minutes on the Today programme 2 days ago. You know, I've been listening out for everything to do with COP24. You know, nada, nothing. I mean, it is extraordinary that we don't deal with that and that all our attention is on plastics. However, we have to understand and be opportunistic about it as communicators and people who need to get their message out. What is it that grips people about the plastic pandemic? And it really does grip them. You know, the Oxford English Dictionary, single-use plastics is a phrase in there for the first time. BBC Radio 2 ran a massive story competition for children, and the word that was most picked up in all of the stories from, you know, all across the age groups was plastic. You know, this has pervaded people's consciousness, their living rooms, schoolrooms, in a way that no other environmental issue has. So for me, just personally, on a personal level, it's been very strange because I'm usually like haranguing people, running down the street, trying to, please talk to me about plastics or something, or climate change. And this time they're coming to me. I was filming in Wales, which has a very good recycling rate, by the way, as I'm sure you all know. But I was filming in Wales, and I was in Tesco's using one of the Costa coffee machines. Thank you. And somebody ran over to me, and they said, "Oh, just checking you're using a reusable cup." And he had his phone like that, like, you know, if I hadn't been, he was well, I don't know what he's going to do with that information. I mean, I'm not sure there's a market for it. But anyway, I think he said his wife wanted to know. They always blame the wife, don't they, honestly? So, you know, the other thing that we have to bear in mind, which is good news, is that we have so much information. Who here is involved or knows about planetary boundaries? Yes, good. I love a bit of planetary boundaries. So we have become such a geological force in our own right as humans that we have shifted geological epoch. It's incredible, isn't it, through consumption and resource use. So we now enter the Anthropocene. So we were in the Holocene for 12,000 years. We've now entered the Anthropocene. Isn't that extraordinary? Again, no one ever talks about this. It's never mentioned, really. And yet the report called Hothouse Earth, which aggregated all of this stuff from the Stockholm Resilience Institute and fed it into climate change statistics and came out in the summer, was downloaded 270,000 times. You know, that's extraordinary for a report like that, which is based on planetary boundary science and climate modelling. So it suggests to me that people are more interested in this stuff than they are given credit for. So we know, thanks to that work, we know that what we have to do, in a sense, so they divided the Earth up into 9 segments. It's a bit like Trivial Pursuit, if you remember Trivial Pursuit. And then there's basically another band that goes around the outside that shows you a safe operating zone. So if we're making, producing, designing anything, this is what we need to be talking about, because we have the figures, we have the modelling. At COP24, the climate talks, what we've got to stop doing is get political leaders negotiating with the science. You can't negotiate with the science. The science is the science. What we need to do is act on the science. So we've got all of this knowledge, and one of the things I love about social media is that you can tap up experts at any time. All of them, they're accessible to you. What a great resource. And yet, we still have this. So my plastic work, if I can call it that, sounds really snobby, my stuff around plastics is really motivated from a point of anger, actually. You know, anger is quite motivational sometimes. I don't think all the time because it's exhausting, but and it's really the shrink-wrapped coconut. It's the only reason I'm here today. I hate them. I really hate them. In 2006, when I came across them for the first time, Morrisons were one of the biggest purveyors of shrink-wrapped coconuts, and we had a lot of exchanges. And eventually they wrote to me and they said, this was excuse number 14 or something like that, they said, oh, we have to shrink-wrap them because they're dangerous to children, because the hair, the fibrous hair that Mother Nature has provided may get to choke a child. So we wrote back to them and we said, well, you don't see shrink-wrapped brushes in hardware stores. Like, what's going on there? There's a disparity here. And eventually they agreed to stop doing it. Well, I was stupid because I parked the issue and I got distracted by other things, which is what happens, but not this time. And then I go back after the Great Awakening from Blue Planet, etc., and this is what I find. They're even worse. They've got a ring pull in the top, which is plastic. There's another bit of plastic underneath with a straw, which is wrapped in plastic. And they are stamped with the phrase genuine coconut, which just adds insult to injury. What is a non-genuine coconut? So these are all things that we are having to contend with. I am just going to... Can anyone tell me what this is, please? Come on, someone here is going to know. Do you know? No. Oh my God, some people normally say it's a date. One person's got it right, actually. I've been asking this all over the country. This is the European code for plastic waste. So this is what gets attached to the container, plastic waste and mixed plastics. So what's come to light and what's been one of the big stories, obviously, is where does our recycling go to? And I'm sure we're going to have an interesting panel discussion in a moment when our panellists answer the question of how much can actually be recycled in the UK. We know that there is a gap between the plastics gap, it's been called, between what can be recycled here and what is called recyclable. Well, anything's recyclable, isn't it? Depends how much energy and effort and money you put into the whole equation. So we know that actually a lot of our waste is destined for other countries. We know there's an issue with China, as we talked about. So we know all this. But this is all things that the general public are coming across for the first time. So there's a sense of betrayal. There's a sense of, we didn't know that was happening. If you want to see somebody shocked, take them to a recycling centre and have the recycling centre manager say, we're not selling those yoghurt pots in this week. We're going to incinerate them. They've spent, an hour and a half washing all their recycling out all week. They're not going to be best pleased. Okay, so one of the things we did was get a lot of beach waste. So this is one of the things that I'd said there'd be some takeaway points. I'm now going to give you some takeaway points. We have to have visuals for television. I know it sounds really obvious, but the amount of stories I get where I've got this great idea and it's written down on a piece of paper. Well, my editor is not going to spend 5 minutes of primetime television before EastEnders filming a bit of paper. So how do we make this come alive? Every editor asks me every week, can you take me and show me where the plastic is? And it's really not that simple, but we have to make it simple for them. On this occasion, we brought the plastic and dumped it outside the BBC. It felt like the right thing to do. We weren't fired, amazingly, and we built our studio out of this set. And the 19th of April, for me, was a really big deal because the whole show was dedicated to the plastics issue, solutions as well as problems. There's a lot of people who are doing their own research. This is from a man called Daniel Webb from Margate, who was so dissatisfied by the answers he got from his council about plastic waste that he collected all his plastic waste for a year, and his sister stayed in his flat last year, sharing a room with 22 bags of plastic waste. It's not ideal, it's not for everybody, but people are doing it because we needed the evidence. Data sets are missing from this, and anybody in the industry at whatever level, whatever product, needs to be providing more data. We need more disclosure so we know what to do. Okay, so as I am... Oh, I've run out of time. Okay, so there's so much I can talk about. So this is one of the stories that went down well, just to tell you what the stories. So 10% of plastic waste in the sea, as we probably know, is caused by marine waste. So I went to off the coast of Sicily to the Aeolian Islands. This fishing net, had been in the sea for 10 years, adrift, since a fish farm just left it there. There's no accountability at all. Catching fish. The local fishermen hated it as well, tried to get it out, but they couldn't. So these are two NGOs, Healthy Seas and Ghost Fishing, a dive team from the Netherlands, who got this net out of the water. It weighed 2.5 tons, and it's been there for 10 years. It was 200 metres long. It's a monster net. That then is recycled or regenerated, that yarn, into new apparel. And I think Adidas, who've pioneered the ocean fibre trainer, they're projected to do 7 or 8 million pairs this year. They're huge. And these are the sorts of stories that it's easy to sell in. But what's the effect? Are we really going to pretend that we can remove every bit of ocean plastic through some divers from the Netherlands on their days off coming out? It's absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? But these are the sort of ideas that are visual. They capture the public's imagination, and they seem to suggest that we can do something. So very briefly, how do we translate that appeal to other ideas which don't have all those ingredients? Well, I think some of it Some of it is about standardisation and making things easy, which I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation does really well. You'll have your own opinion on whether that works for you or not. But it's this idea of this very responsible, trusted body holding all our anxieties and actually making them into a system that works. We're all of us supposed to be good at making and designing systems, so we need to show the public how good we are. We're also moving into an era of co-creation and collaboration like never before, and I would like to see a lot more opening up, like Simply Cups, a lot more projects that bring everyone together in a really constructive way, because that actually does have great appeal for the general public. We can't talk into this or about all of this, but with its usual restraint, the press, having said there's no homogenised media, the media said when this enzyme discovery was made by the University of Portsmouth, the media went nuts and all the headlines said, plastic solved, essentially, just put the enzymes on them. So I had people coming up to me in the street and saying, oh, you don't have to worry anymore, do you? It's all done, it's all done. And obviously the reality is a little bit more complicated than that, but it is still fascinating. So I want more unicorns. I want more people talking about the opportunities and the fact that some of these businesses are really, really alive, and some of these opportunities are really alive. So, for example, if I can find it, I received a press release yesterday about somebody who's basically all they're doing is putting an aluminium straw, a reusable straw, out on the market. But the way it's been written, oh my God, it was thrilling. It was all about, oh, Bacardi can't achieve what we're achieving. The reusable straw removes 1.1 billion straws from the planet. This is what takes Bacardi 2 years. I mean, it's probably nonsense, but it's a very appealing read. And I think we need to generate more buzz, like the fashion industry is starting to do with some of its models, with some of its renting and re-wearing models. That's what we need to do on this issue as well, because don't forget, people do respond to excitement and novelty. Okay, and then I'm just going to leave you with a very short video, which is from BuzzFeed. And this is just a message. If you think the mainstream media is obtuse and sometimes goes for clickbait, here's what's happening on BuzzFeed. And I'd love to get your response to this video that came out yesterday. Maybe you'll love it, maybe you'll hate it. But can we run the VT? Thank you.
We need to talk about recycling. I hear a lot of people tell me I recycle. Well, I'm here to tell you I want you to stop recycling. No thanks. Okay. Well, actually, I'd like you to focus less on recycling and more on reducing. We have a huge plastic problem. It's in everything from our clothes to the fish we eat. Only 9% of all the plastic that gets produced actually gets recycled. We've been mass producing plastic since the 1950s. Plastic can take up to 450 years to break down, and 60% of all that plastic is still on our planet. Plastic production creates greenhouse gases, which contribute to climate change. What you need to understand about recycling is that it's only as valuable as the market for it. Recycling is a billion-dollar industry. Just because you put something in the recycling bin doesn't mean that it actually gets recycled. It has to be processed, baled, put on the market, and if someone doesn't buy it, it doesn't get recycled. In fact, 50% of the things in recycling bins aren't recycled. Up until January of 2018, China was importing and processing nearly half of the world's plastic and paper recyclables. But they aren't accepting nearly as much plastic waste as they used to, which has left the recycling industry in a crisis. Around the world, recyclable materials have been going to landfill and polluting environments. We have all this plastic, and we keep producing more to meet demand, but our Earth is swimming in plastic. So that's why I'm asking you to focus on reducing your use of plastics rather than just recycling.
Okay, so that started off with like don't recycle and then backtracked within the first 30 seconds. But it just gives you an indication of how these issues are increasingly being discussed. And with that in mind, I'd like to invite our stellar panel onto the stage where we're going to have another discussion, and hopefully you'll get a chance to ask some questions at the end of it. So if I can invite the panel up on stage, we're going to consider the future of cup recycling and all sorts of things. So please come up, give them a round of applause, please, to make them feel more comfortable. Can we reset the clock?
Only a minus.
Stuck, absolutely.
Okay, as Mary makes her way down, I'm just going to introduce our panellists sitting here, starting with Oliver Rose-Veer from Costa, here at the end on my right. Oliver's responsible for managing the environmental impact of the company as head of environment. Since joining Costa, he's done all sorts of things. He's delivered a 38% reduction in carbon emissions. Please, Mary, come and sit down. In carbon emissions, the Costa Coffee Roastery in Lambeth was the first to implement ISO 5001 energy management standard. On waste, he's developed schemes with BioBean and Veolia, and he's the architect of Costa's commitment to recycle 500 million cups by 2020. That's all right, don't worry. Welcome. It sounds like you've done your bit, but we want to hear what else you're doing in a minute. So bear with us. Next to Oliver, we have Adrian Pratt, who's the marketing manager here representing Bender's Paper Cups. I know that you wear different hats, which you can please bring that into the mix as well.
I shall.
This is written in the first person. I'm going to say it as you. Having worked throughout my career in the food service industry, no, it's too weird. Okay.
It was for me as well.
He began in food and beverages, and he spent the last 20 years in packaging. He has witnessed firsthand the dramatic changes in the UK eating and drinking culture. Now marketing manager at Bender's Paper Cups and working across industry to deliver paper cup recycling. And Adrian is a founder member of the Paper Cup Recovery and Recycling Groups and lots of other things. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next to Adrian, we have Sophie Thomas. You've got so many letters after your name. We're very honoured to have you here. An established leader in communication and design and in the investigation and promotion of circular economy design principles. She's worked in the fields of ethical design, behaviour change, that's important, and material processes throughout her agency, Thomas Matthews Limited, for 20 years. She's assisted businesses, government, everybody basically, and worked with major organisations through her own project, The Great Recovery. She's also one of the first designers to become a chartered waste manager. That's really impressive. Thank you for being here. And Mary Cray, welcome, MP and chair of the Environmental Audit Committee. I was grilled by Mary and her panel, as I mentioned in my opening talk. She was first elected MP for Wakefield in 2005, and she held the Environment, Transport and International Development briefs in the Shadow Cabinet between 2010 and 2015. And as I said, she's served as chair of the Environmental Audit Select Committee since February 2016. I want to mention this because you did have a life before Parliament, obviously, and you taught entrepreneurship at Cranfield University's School of Management, which I always love about you, and that's why you know so much stuff. Right, welcome to our panel. I think we need to just start off by getting a little position statement, like where we are on the recycling of coffee cups, and just bung in a couple of things, new things that you've never said before. Oliver, I want to start with you.
So I guess on the whole sort of cup recycling side of things, Costa's really trying to take a leadership position. We're the UK's largest coffee shop. We have not only our stores, but also our Costa Express machines as well. And I guess we take the view that we really need to take responsibility for making sure that those products that we put onto the market are taken off the market and recycled. I don't think it really sort of dodges the fact that actually we want to encourage reuse as well. So even last week we actually released our new contactless cup, which is the idea of actually bringing payment to the reusable cup to try and encourage reuse. But the fact is that practically a lot of people on the street want to be able to drink their coffee on the go. And the paper cup is a fairly good way of delivering that. You know, it has to have a liner in there to make it waterproof. But essentially, what we've tried to do is make sure that we increase the availability of recycling in the UK. So over the last few years, we moved from only having one reprocessor in the UK being James Cropper to extending that to Ace UK, onwards to DS Smith. And we did a lot of work with DS Smith to understand the recyclability of coffee cups. And that now means that capacity-wise, there's more than enough capacity to recycle these cups. The challenge is...
What, your cups or all cups?
All cups. All cups are non-composted. Yeah. So essentially a polyethylene lined cup can go to either James Cropper, Ace UK or DS Smith. Those cups can be pulped and they will be turned into anything from shopping bags to high-end luxury packaging to boxes for online retailers, and essentially replacing material that would have actually come from potentially virgin material as well. The challenge really is actually about collecting those cups. So earlier this year, we actually made a commitment to recycle the amount of cups we put onto the market. So essentially, we are funding the waste management industry and incentivizing them to start recovering cups, not only from our own stores, so every single one of our 2,000 stores is able to recover those cups and recycle them. We did 14 million cups last year. We expect to do 22 million this year. But also, we recognise that actually a lot of cups go out the door. They're a takeaway product. They go into universities, they go into shopping centres, they go into airports. So what we've tried to do is incentivise the waste management industry to start collecting those cups from those facilities. And we're getting really good traction now. So we made a commitment this year to recycle 100 million cups in the first 12 months and 500 million cups by 2020. How we're doing that is, as well as driving ourselves and other retailers to get cup recycling in their own stores, we're working with airports. Heathrow and Gatwick are already recycling cups in the airport space. We're working with universities to actually look at how we get students to recycle on campuses. We're working with shopping centres like Blue Water to actually start driving all the retailers in those spaces to start recovering cups. The real challenge now is getting that message out to the consumer so they know where and how they can recycle those cups, and that's what we're really pushing.
Thank you. I just want really one quick question. So if you've got all of that sewn up, what is the incentive for reusables?
The incentive for reusables is about actually making it, one, practical and easy. So this is the idea of actually how do you make it something that people remember to take away and carry themselves. It is about incentivizing as well. So we, along with other retailers, generally offer a discount. We offer 25p at the moment. And we try and...
heart in it.
Absolutely. I mean, we would much rather have reuse than we would single use.
Okay.
But the fact is that practically, I think a lot of consumers just aren't ready to make that step. We've got to take them on that journey.
Thank you. We will discuss that. Adrian, where are you at right now?
So right now, the primary function of the Paper Cup Recycling Group was to bring all parts of the industry chain together in the first place so that we could share experience and knowledge and understanding to deliver solution. So as Ollie's already mentioned, we do now have a capability within UK resource to manage all of the cups that are on the high street marketplace. So your earlier slides about waste going to China doesn't impact on the paper cup chain. We can manage that. There is sufficient resource to repulp all of that product, to take the PE lining away and recycle that as well.
At what cost? Energy-wise, does it make sense environmentally?
The cost at the moment is in the process of getting it from the point of use into those waste streams. Those waste streams already exist. The misconception about requirement of specialist recycling facilities that was part of the early story about why cups are bad isn't necessarily the case. There are different facilities, different types of process, but both of the primary repulping processes in the UK can manage our PE-lined cup.
Who's responsible for the why cups are bad story? Is it me and you? Right, just so we know.
And I'm not apologising for it.
No, I don't expect you to. Okay, thank you, Adrian. Sophie.
Hello.
Hello.
So part of the process that I look at is the whole of the value chain and the behaviour change around what happens at each stages. And I've been coming to this conference, probably from the beginning, and hearing all these great stories. And I constantly have conversations with Peter about what about the contamination? Is it now coming from the post-consumer position, which is great if it is, if your cups are actually coming from that? Because when we were because I read an article about cups going through the system, when I started my design studios with a lot of designers, I drink a hell of a lot of coffee. I love coffee. I'm just putting it out there. I still love coffee. I worked out probably about 15 years ago, I was spending, I think, about £9 a day on takeaway coffee. And when I worked it out, I thought, oh my goodness, that is quite a lot of cups of coffee. It was about 7 cups a day, right? So then this is at a point that 15 years ago, you imagine this conversation we're having right now was not on the agenda. And if you look at the coffee industry as it is, it's set to double in the next decade. It's currently, apparently Britain spend, £7.9 billion a year on coffee. I think that's a figure that I pulled out last year. So it's a really big business. It's a really great product. why is it that we are struggling with the end, this end of life? This is why the numbers are massive. It's like plastic. The numbers are massive, are set to grow. So,
But there is no problem, apparently.
well, when we were having this, and this is something that I'd really like to have this debate, because I always really want to have a good news story about coffee. I absolutely am completely behind the whole of this. In this article, one of the big good news stories that I talked about was Simply Cups, because it is absolutely, from a designer, you have to think about the system. And when quite recently, I spent quite time doing ethnography studies with lots of consumers, looking at the whole of the packaging range. The material illiteracy in people, is this paper? I can put this cup into a paper cup recycling bin. And we were going, what happens to that? And the outcome of that is that I did an LCA study for Festival Republic last year, and we were looking at what was the best cup for them, in terms of what could they give up. And we were looking at single-use ones versus polyprop versus hot drinks versus cold drinks, and it all comes down to the system. And actually, the conversation that we then had was, okay, so what happens when Festival Republic says the whole of the arena side has to become biodegradable? And then they were getting in paper cups with a PLA lining and Simply Cups where they're going, we can't take these because it doesn't belong to that system. So this illiteracy, this complexity, this confusion is adding more and more layers to the consumer. I mean, I just stand in front of bins going, and people are asking me, and I'm like,
What
I
was
don't
the
know which
conclusion
to
of your report?
The conclusion to the report is that if you have an organisation like Simply Cups who want to take those cups, you can have one that has a PE lining. If you don't have someone like that and they don't understand their composting system, they will end up in the... But the best solution is reusable in that situation.
Okay, so that's really clear. So all of this capacity, what does that add up to?
Well, I mean, the debate that I'd really want to have is about whether it's taking post-consumer waste, because the problem was about the contamination, the coffees. And actually, when we were there with ACE UK and looking at the material you get back from these beautiful, pristine cups, which have a 10-minute life, beautiful white, you get this brown material, that, I think as a consumer, you think that that cup is going to be recycled back to a cup. And it's just not. So it's like, I think within this room, the answers are here, and the solutions are here within this value chain of people, and I want to see it elevated, pushed more. I want to be the people behind you, pushing you, and getting the designers to help with that situation.
Okay, great, thank you. Mary, you're not going to apologise, nor should you.
Never
Let's
apologise,
go.
never explain, first rule of politics.
Yeah.
I think I'm partially responsible for the beginning the national conversation about this issue, and I think we had Oliver in front of us, and we had the paper cup recycling group in front of us as well. And we went back to basics on this, and we looked at the amount of coffee cups we were using 2 years ago, 2.5 billion, enough to stretch around the world. I think it's 5 times. We looked at the fact that 500,000 coffee cups a day are being littered. So wherever you're selling them, there was a Costa cup outside my front door as I stepped into the street this morning. And I got it and I put it into my London recycling bin, a thing that I couldn't do if I was in my Wakefield home, because my Wakefield recycling does not take them, and it doesn't take Tetra Pak. And I couldn't do it if I was in Manchester either. So, good luck with explaining that one to everybody. And I put it into my recycling bin, and we basically worked out that if you met your 30 million target, which was your target 2 years ago, and well, hats off to you in Costa, you have tried, and I never criticise people for trying, but we did the maths when we were writing our report, which was that even if you got to your 30 million, that's still a drop in the ocean of the 2.5 billion coffee cups that are sold. And actually, it's gone up. So every week, we've sold an extra 1 million coffee cups. So when I was writing the report, I was trying to think about what I'd heard from your industry, from the coffee industry, from the cup recycling industry, and all I could hear was end-of-pipe solutions, which is, we're not very good at doing this, we don't want to change our business model, it's convenient, people like it, people are confused, we can help them with that. And I like Costa, and I've got a Costa in Wakefield, and I watch people go out, they grab their Costas, they go out, they drink it on the platform, and they put it into the mixed. I don't know what happens to the Network Rail recycling or what happens to it, but I'm like, there it is. They don't know. It's literally, I could literally get the bin and bring it back into the coffee shop, but obviously I don't because that would be weird.
What do you like about Costa? You just said you like Costa.
I like the fact that it was one of the first coffee shops to open in Wakefield. When I was elected 13 years ago, there was only one independent coffee shop in Wakefield, and it was almost like the first sign. There's a kind of basic level with Costa, which I really like, which is, you're going to get a nice cup of coffee and it's going to be a nice feeling and a nice treat. And if you've got children, you've got the whole hot chocolate options to make them feel a bit sick afterwards. But I like the fact that there's it brings...
Might want to
I'll say that.
Oh dear, I don't like
Who
all
does
the
the chocolate?
things. I don't like all the ginger thing. That's all sick.
Oh, we're getting into a whole different level of
secret sugar.
Yeah.
But no, what I like is that it's a level that is good. And if you think about the coffee that we had when we were growing up, it was like that kind of steamed milk and the Nescafe all together. So it's.
But that's an important point. We like you, but we hate you, because what do we do with that?
And I think
Can I say two things
Yes.
more? So first of all, the latte levy is the only way that we're going to get consumer behaviour, and it is very wrong of the Chancellor not to introduce it in the budget after all of the stuff they said last year about tackling single-use plastics, looking at latte levy. When they said in the summer, we're not going to introduce it, we knew then that it was game over. And we know from all the environmental psychologists and ethnographists that people respond better to a charge than a discount, because why would you bother bringing a cup in your bag when it's absorbed in the cost? So that's the point number one, is only Starbucks has really got to grips with the latte levy. And where they've done it in central London, they have more than trebled the use of recyclable cups. So, and the second thing is, we have to get out of today's mindset and get into tomorrow's mindset. So we've got 12 years to tackle carbon emissions and move really rapidly to net zero. So just carry on saying, oh yeah, it's another million a week and next year it'll be 3.5 billion. It's just not on. It's just not, it's not acceptable. And I've gone from being a kind of, what's the word, a kind of live and let live, pro-business person, because I worked with lots of really great businesses, into a kind of, your business is not sustainable unless it's sustainable and has sustainability at its
You've
core.
had enough, basically, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yes. Let's talk about the latte levy then, because that's extremely important. Because your report, the Environmental Audit Committee, was very clear that the levy needed to happen.
Yeah.
What happened? So you guys when the Chancellor announced that we were swerving the levy, or however you want to put it, that's a victory for lobbying, isn't it?
It's a position that is under review. It's not gone away. It's still hanging there, and it's with industry to prove that the path that we're on will deliver a higher use of reusable cups, solution to recycling.
For the extra time, Mary's just talked about the imperative, the 12 years of save the planet. I mean, that's not a joke. Can we afford these extra built-in bits of time for you to obfuscate? Because that's how a lot of people see it. They see this as a swerve. And the perception is you knew it was needed and you've lobbied against it.
I mean, I would slightly challenge. I mean, we talk about the Starbucks levy, the 5p levy they applied. So that drove reuse from 2% to 5%. But actually, there's other retailers who offer a higher discount, or actually just talk about it more and actually make it more easy to do. And actually, they've seen much higher rates of reuse. That's very much a London thing. So I think absolutely we need to look at how we incentivize it. And for me, that's about making it practical, and that's about making it desirable to actually do that. When you actually look at our actual makeup of drinking anyway, quite often, if you look at our stores, we actually sell 6% of our stores drink in China cups. And we're always very much trying to push that drink in. That's very much about what we're about, because that's what drives sales, is the honest answer. The takeaway market, it is there and it is growing, and I don't don't disagree with that. So I think we have to look at different solutions. We have to push reuse, we have to make it more practical, and that's why we look at the different ways of doing that through the right designs of reusable cups, through the right incentives, and by making it practical and easy. But we also need to accept that a lot of people will still want coffee on the go and will drink that through a paper cup. So we need to invest in the infrastructure. I think one of the challenges that we've seen is that historically the PRN system has been massively underfunded, and actually where do business pay in order to fund that waste system for the councils? And we've been really calling for that rise in PRN reform.
How do you justify, Oliver, when a new Costa opens, because your business model's based on expansion and more volume, as it did where I live, you're introducing a new pollution source to somewhere that's never had it before, and I happen to live near a river, so that for me is Russian roulette, and that's unacceptable. If we'd have had the latte levy to go with the introduction of the new store, I think people would have felt slightly differently about it. When you're looking at risk and perception and the opportunity of change, surely the latte levy would kind of worked in your favour. You could have led that. Why did you choose not to?
I think, to be honest, very much our focus is around driving that reuse up through practical, making it more practical, and through driving in store as well, and making sure we can recover those cups. My worry with the latte levy was very specific on coffee cups, and actually the investment in terms of recycling and in terms of reuse needs to be entirely on the go. We've had a massive growth in the on-the-go market, and actually infrastructure hasn't kept up with it. And actually the practical element, we need to tackle that bit much more widely. Focusing specifically on coffee cups, I think
it's still an end-of-pipe solution, and our research found that 1 in 400 coffee cups is recycled, so that's 0.25%. Now, you can double that and get to 0.5%, and you can quadruple that and get to 1%, but it's still a drop in the ocean around what is needed. And when I talk about the business model of tomorrow, you're still stuck in the business model of today, which is we're growing, we're expanding, we're opening, and nothing changes. But Lucy says when it comes to her street, it goes to her river, it goes off into the oceans, and guess where it ends up? Time and tide means it ends up in the Arctic, and as the Arctic melts, all of those plastics that we've been sending up there since the 50s are now being released, and we know that the Arctic is melting, the Greenland ice sheet, again in the newspaper again today. So these things are not consequence-free decisions, and what we tried to set out in our report is that the end-of-pipe solution, which is all the investment. I agree with you about PRN. 90% of the cost of recycling and collection is paid for by councils who have lost 60% of their budgets. They are now looking after elderly children, elderly people and vulnerable children. There's nothing left. There's no libraries, there's no swimming pools, there's no nice to have, there's nothing.
And I absolutely agree with you in that sense, and that's exactly why we have put the system in place that we put in. So we put a voluntary PRN system in for coffee cups specifically. We actually pay the waste industry, not for our cups, for cups in the market to drive an economic ability to recycle cups in the UK. We took that decision as a business because it was the right thing to do, and we knew that investment had to happen. What we're also doing is we're out there, not just putting cups recycle for our own stores, but actually talking to all the places we know these cups end up. We did a massive piece of research with Sheffield University, which actually looked at exactly when you walk away from our coffee store, exactly where do those cups end up? And yes, some of them end up on the street, of course they do, but actually a huge amount of them end up in offices, in universities, in train stations, and airports. That's where we have to focus the infrastructure and put that in. Now, that isn't necessarily controlled by the councils, it's controlled by the landlords, it's controlled by the retailers. That's where our focus is to make sure we take our responsibility, but the whole system takes the responsibility, not just the coffee shops, but actually everyone. The train stations are out there that put the right recycling systems in place, but also trying to reduce down reuse in the first place. I don't think we want to use more of these things.
Sorry, we need to press on. So as far as you're concerned, you've come up with an effective solution based on the evidence. Is that what you're saying?
Based on the evidence, I think, to fix the problem at the moment. But I think we have to push down reuse. We absolutely have to push up reuse as well. And I don't think I would disagree with the fact we want to use less of these things, but we need to deal with the problem.
Cups are just one part of on the go, and it is the PRN system reform that will share the burden across all packaging that goes to market that will provide the infrastructure. The problem with the latte levy proposal, with money going back into Treasury, is it would not have funded infrastructure in recycling and on the go. There was no attempt to hypothecate it or ring-fence it or anything of that nature, whereas PRN money, in the reformed view of that, would help fund recycling infrastructure where it's needed and bring that product back out of the market into second life uses.
Well, we're still waiting for the waste and resources strategy, and it's supposed to be imminent. Who knows when it'll be published? I think.
In the autumn, apparently.
Yeah, the autumn. Yeah, it was the spring. Now it's
Before
the autumn.
Christmas.
Yeah,
In 22 hours, that's what I read yesterday.
in 22 hours.
And that was yesterday, so it must be coming out now.
Yeah, so it'll be happening tomorrow then, which is good.
Hamstrung by O2's
But
data
my
failure.
point, I come back to the point, if Oliver gets to 30 million, that's 30 million out of 3 billion. So that's...
Well, I mean, again, I'd just correct that number. So, in fact, we've actually already committed this year to do 100 million cups, and actually by 2020 we intend to recycle as many cups we put onto the market, we'll take back off the market.
Which is how many?
Which would be less than 500 million cups. We actually used 420 million cups last year, and actually that hasn't grown in the amounts that have been talked about in the media. They talked about 20% rise in 2 years. We haven't increased our cup.
Okay, I just want to ask you, and this is not a facetious question, okay, so this is a completely neutral tone, okay? How do you think those figures sound to the average person who watched Blue Planet and has awoken to this plastic crisis?
I think the fact that we use that many is a shame because we want to use less. You know, we don't want to be using single-use, reuse, but actually that's the decision by the consumer. You know, we need...
So Sophie, can I ask you a question, Sophie, please? In a way, the concerned consumer, if there really are these armies of people that feel really strongly about this, and if the design comes up, so you mentioned our cup before that you like, if the design comes up to meet those expectations, surely we can leapfrog all of this problem because the design will be so captivating and make it so easy.
Yes.
Is that possible?
Of course it is. And I think what's really interesting about, I mean, I'm just sort of listening to this discussion, and actually I'm thinking, yes, all of this is end of pipe, and what is happening is a reactive thing, and that's actually, today, that is what we need to do. We need to be reactive because the situation as we are currently at is not acceptable. And also, you need to be look like you're doing something. You know, we need, and actually doing it, not just look like you're doing it, but actually doing it. The question for me is, as you say, what about tomorrow? What about the future? Because that is if you look at what a cup is, you've got this virgin paper, which, you know, apparently the UK coffee habit uses about 100,000 trees a year. So you've got this very highly engineered design product, a disposable cup, which has two materials in it, which actually we have spent quite a lot of time trying to work out how to take apart. And now it's great that we have, you know, more than 2 companies that can do it in the UK. Brilliant. And it's a highly engineered, so it's got this, last time I was here, I was learning all about the engineering design of a cup. It's incredibly technical. Now, the question is, you've got all of that emphasis and all this material and all this knowledge and design into a product which is used for 10 minutes on average. So therefore, that to me, from a design perspective, when we talk about there being waste being a flaw in the system, it's actually also, it's a design flaw. Like waste, it shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be using resources like that on a product that lasts for 10 minutes. We should actually be thinking about how do you design a product that can hold a hot beverage for that amount of time. If you want to go out, I mean, actually, my concept would be how could you redesign on the go? Because, you know, it seems to be the UK very addicted to like going out and having to need to walk with their coffee. For God's sake, we can't sit in a cafe for 10 minutes like the Italians, drink it and go out. I mean, and then we could have a proper conversation apart from just running and stressing.
Maybe we don't want to talk to each other.
Oh, wow, there you go. So actually, when you start digging down to it, it goes into a lot of different areas. But actually, can we design a product or something which actually resembles the use life of that product? So we're not trying to massively reverse engineer the way that we do things.
When I was on a train in India in 1990...
I could just imagine you.
Oh, you have no idea.
I know what you're going to say.
The Wild Rover. And I did 2 visits to India, and I was on a train, and people were selling tea in cups, and they were made of earth, and they'd been baked in the sun, and you had this little pottery thing that had been made, and the whole tea experience cost you about 2 rupees. And then when you'd finished your cup of tea, dangerously lurching on the train, so there was no lid, you just chucked it out of the window and it went back to the earth, instantly recycled. How great is that?
Well, we're on the cusp of something, aren't we? Because we've, you know, one of the criticisms about the awakening, as I keep calling it, I must think of a better word, is that the spotlight has also thrust science into the public arena before it's ready. And then behind the scenes, you know, I briefly talked about enzymes, but there is something in that. You know, it's really interesting. And we've also got Imperial College polymateria, talking about biotransformative plastics at a molecular level. Things are going to change really quickly from now on in, right? Maybe. Okay. To be discussed. We need to take some questions because I'm just looking at this clock, which is like my nemesis. Okay. Who's got questions for our panel, please? Don't tell me. Yes, thank you. Sorry, you have to wait for this. Thank you. I didn't say that.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Kirsty. I work for a company called Frugal Pack. Interesting what you were saying, Mary, about the coffee cup in India, throwing it out of the window and it's immediately back to the earth. Do we not think that littering is a completely separate issue from recycling? So you were saying there's a new cost to store, you live near a river, and that's where the cups are going to end up. Is it not that is half the... No,
I don't think so. I think littering is really over-egged in this country. I think we were obsessed with finding these little-outs when we're all little-outs because it's a symptom of the system. The new cost, I'm particularly worried about where I am because there aren't enough bins and it is right near the river and it's a new source of pollution that people haven't had before. So where does everyone else stand? Sorry, I'm not supposed to...
Well, I think your comment about not enough bins is quite interesting in itself because it brings it straight the way back to infrastructure provision and opportunity to dispose correctly on the go.
Yeah, but our streets are narrow, we can't get through.
But I think it's about the type of collection as well. So, in London we have 33 different ways of collecting from households. On the go is a completely different thing. And the consistency across the country, I mean, it's incredibly difficult.
Well, I think there's more. Exactly. I think there's a social aspect of this as well. I think if I go back to previously, I would never have dared littered as a kid. No. And actually, I think people are scared to challenge. I quite regularly will pick up stuff, and if I see a Costa Cup, I'll actually go around. Of course, I'll go and pick it up because it frustrates me to see that on the road or the litter side. But I think people have just got a bit too much of a throwaway culture, and we need to change that at the grassroots, at the educational level, to make sure it's not acceptable to litter.
We've been doing Keep Britain Tidy since time immemorial. Surely, why don't we start from the point of view where everyone who's been educated about littering has been educated, right? Why don't we look at it? I think going back and harking on about litter, there's interesting research from Manchester University that shows that the litter out is a bit of a myth, and actually it's not who you think it is, and blah blah blah.
There's the concept of posh littering, where essentially people just put it on a windowsill, and actually because they think they've disposed of it responsibly, because it's not there. And I think we need to tackle that reasonable.
I do think there is something about behaviour. When we're in discussions, whether I'm sitting with a load of waste managers or whether I'm sitting with manufacturers, they always talk about education. We need to educate the public. And I'm getting a bit fed up with it because actually there's a whole, yes, there's a massive thing about behaviour change. We definitely need to do it. But it's so complex. No one else, what you may see as being a solution, someone else may not see as being a solution. They have a different idea. And actually, we are all very, very different. And we have this problem, we have this homogenized system of we must not all do this, we must all do that. And it just doesn't work.
A cynic would also say you can pay into a PRN system which charges the appropriate amount of money, or you can bung a bit of cash to a litter project.
Yeah.
Which would you rather do?
Yeah, well, I think both are problematic, and I think PRN is problematic because it doesn't look at the units, it looks at the weight.
Yeah.
If you did it on a unit basis and you had to pay 0.2p for every cup you produced, that might be a different story. Two litter stories. First of all, litter is really important. It's an environmental crime, and it's the beginning of starting to feel unsafe in your neighbourhood. Yes. So it's a symptom of nobody cares, so I can do what I like. And as a cyclist, when I see the bloke in the Bentley chucking his little scaggy tissue out of the window, sorry, sir, I think you've dropped this back through the window. Why is my council tax going to pick up Bentley man's rubbish? When I see the lady chucking her fag packet out, excuse me, think you've dropped this. I won't tell you what she said, but it began with F and B, and it was not repeatable. And I cycled very fast down the hill, but she was stuck in traffic. I'm just like, why is this acceptable? And I was waiting at a school and with my daughter, and you're going around schools deciding which school they're going to go to, and one of the mums got a little sweet, just chucked it through the railings. It's like, this is the school you want your kid to come to. You've just fired an opal fruit through the railings. And I swear to God, I had to physically restrain myself so that I didn't pick it up and go, I'm sorry, I think you've dropped. It's absolutely unacceptable. Your point about who the little outs are, everyone blames the kids. It isn't. It's the Bentley driver, it's the smoker, it's the mum who's a bit thoughtless. It's not, and it's really unacceptable. And I think it starts with the can and the Costa cup. And the reason I went and put the Costa cup in my recycling is I thought, everyone who walks past that will notice it, and it acts as a beacon. Once there's one Costa cup, then there'll be an Evian bottle. In fact, there was an Evian bottle, but I didn't have time. By the time I'd spotted that, I was like, I'm really
That's
late.
that's more valuable. That's more recyclable.
Yeah.
But
It's changing that concept.
But I go around and do all of those things, but my point is, it makes people feel unsafe, and yet somehow people just think they have a right to do that. It's a bit like the old dog poo thing. It's like, I pay my tax and my dog is definitely allowed to poo in your street and get on your kids' shoes and get into your house. It's like, no, it's really not. So I think litter is really important, and I come back to value. Until you're paying 25p for your cup, you will chuck it.
I love
So sale and use back, charge me £1, I'll bring it back next time.
I love the idea of prioritising which litter you collect based on value as
But
well.
I think that's one of the points we talk about the latter levy versus a charge. Actually, I think if there was an incentive, put it in and you take it back, then actually that could start to drive people taking it back. I think a straight out charge actually in some ways might actually change people into the other direction. It's, well, I paid for it now.
Paid for it,
so actually it goes. Whereas I think actually I do understand the
That's
idea of PRS. That starts
positive
to
return
Evidence
schemes.
from Starbucks.
I want to take some more questions, please. Okay, this gentleman here. Yes, blue shirt, 3 rows back. It's you. It's you, sir.
Oh, Martin.
Martin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, yeah. Sorry, Martin Kirsch, Food Service Packaging Association. A lot of stuff is being said here, and I'm glad, Mary, you've raised, you made your point about litter. Isn't it about time, though, we stopped addressing and looking at and cherry-picking individual items, for instance, because there's such a big debate about straws, and we just had a consultation as well, and looked at our entire on-the-go waste management system and addressed the fact that whether you like it or not, this is the way the public like to live their lives. And I think it's going to be tough to try and say, well, no, you should be sitting in cafes and not walking with your coffee along the street.
Okay, thank you. Sophie, can you respond to that?
I think it's a really good question. It is from the research that I've done with different councils across the UK about on the go. It's it doesn't work as a system, as a collection thing. The way that we collect on the go, as having, like a sort of collectible, recyclable materials, doesn't work. No. We're getting far too much contamination, huge amount of food contamination, because that's what on the go is, effectively. ACE UK and they're not going to be able to deal with this stuff. It's so contaminated. I mean, that's a conversation we haven't.
But I think that's part of the system, and that's why we very much aren't focusing on street bins. We're focusing on getting it back into facilities that are far more owned, and that's what drives it.
Completely right. I mean, that the kind of concept of separating out, and we've had the conversations about, do we, for instance, could we test a wet and dry system on the go? Could we test different ways of collection? Where is that happening? There are separate cases of that. We need to start trialling on this stuff to see how we shift behaviours for that. So,
Could money make a difference if it's flooded in?
No, action. Yes, we need money to trial this stuff, but action makes the difference. It's demonstration stuff. It's like designing new systems for people. I actually think that you probably could get people away from being so addicted to on the go. I think actually we could try it. I mean, I think we talk about stress.
We have the right to do that. I mean,
well, maybe we should have a think about it.
Going back to the Soviet Union here.
Oh no! I mean, it's like opening nice. It's nice Italian cafes. I mean, I'd happily go there and.
As I said,
Sorry, can I just call order? So, do you equate the removal of the opportunity to use a single-use plastic as like being in the Soviet Union?
No, but what I do kind of object to is limiting the way people can live their lives and saying your choices are limited and so on.
But we do live on one planet.
Because as Mary said, bring back to the
responsibly.
to save the planet. Like, what about the future? What about, kids today? We're compromising their future by having this now and making money off single-use plastic. Surely that's the way to look at this. Not about fighting for straws.
No, we were talking about the way they live their lives on the go, and the point is, surely if this is what the public want to do, because no one, I believe, is forcing them to do that, then surely they must have some sort of right to live their lives and consume in that way, if that fits their lives.
I do.
With responsibility.
A lunch hour, for example, would that be a social solution which would bring a design solution which would...
I think it's like having, when you have a design challenge like this, you don't always go, as I say, you don't always go for one solution. You have to try different things. And different cities and different communities will want different things. But the fact that I actually don't agree with the phrase that this is what the citizens want. I don't believe when we're born we think, I really want to be able to get a sandwich on the go and make sure I work at my desk and do shitloads of hours for my company.
Why
to be fair, sorry.
Oh, Brexit.
Yes.
Sorry. But the point is that actually there's a kind of the want and what we're offered, they're being merged together. And I think we have to separate. The behaviour work that we've done really shows there's the helplessness of people, the feeling that they have absolutely no, they just don't know what to do on this situation. I think we have to offer and design and think around what kinds of solutions are out there. They may say, yes, I want to set up a picnic club, by the side of, in my park every Wednesday, and it's all bring your own, and I bring it in my, I don't know. But we need to test these things across all the different personas of people, because, as I said, some people love to bring their own cup, some people do want to take a go and walk with it.
Thank you, Mary.
Straws, stirrers and cotton buds are being banned because the EU says we have to ban them, and I think you probably know that. So that's a slightly false question, Martin, and it's definitely not back to the USSR. I agree passionately with Sophie. I think we buy the things we're told we need, but we can only use 3 billion coffee cups a year because people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi and Rwanda definitely aren't using that, and the people in India aren't either, and the people in China aren't. So the question is, we can only have it because they can't. So I think there's a really big issue of global equity here, which when we place it into the planetary boundaries is, we're making 100, we're doing clothes at the moment, we're making 100 billion garments a year. There's only 7 billion of us on the planet. So I'm buying 20 things, okay, maybe 15 now, but lots of other people are buying nothing. And so what are we doing in terms of an overproduction and an overconsumption? And that's where I come back to bending this curve. Until we bend the curve, we won't have sustainable businesses.
Okay, this lady's been waiting very patiently.
I work for the University of Nottingham on behalf of Sodexo, and there's a real shift between the culture of drinking and obviously coffee at the moment. We're seeing the massive trend changes. And my question is, do you think that consumers actually understand where their waste is going? Because working in a university environment, I would definitely say that they don't. And it's only until I started looking into these things that I actually understand the impact of myself going out and having a disposable cup that actually has. And my question is sort of maybe to Ollie to sort of say, is there not some responsibility to making that product so available, but it's so hard? Obviously we've got things like Simply Cups, things like that, but then that's just saying to people, oh, it's okay because it gets recycled. Is there not more responsibility to actually remove that product and let people know what actually happens to the things that they're using?
I think sort of to answer the first question, I don't think people know enough about what their waste, where their waste goes. I think there's been a bit of an awakening over the last few months in terms of the move to China, and I think one of the things we're trying to do in terms of getting the recycling is actually get absolute traceability is getting recycled, which has been the big issue. I think materials has been going through, and actually no one knows where it's going with this system. Because it's all in the UK, we can trace it, we can trace the tonnage, we know what's going on. I think to the point of models, I think university is a really good example. So University of Winchester have a great model where they're actually sort of driving reuse, and actually that's driven it to 33% in a closed environment because it's quite practical to do that. But there's still 70% of the cups that's still in paper cups. So I think it's starting to move that model, and we need to make people realise that they do have an opportunity to have an impact. But actually, it's also putting solutions in to deal with the impact of that is still used. And so I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think we can kind of go, we should just get on the reuse route, because that is a massive shift change. And I think we've got to go on a journey as opposed to tomorrow we just switch it off. There are examples where people have taken the decision to take coffee cups out of their market. Boston Tea Party being an example of that. But actually, that's when you've got a business that actually isn't a primary coffee shop. It is, I think, 10% of their sales was coffee, and actually the majority was drinking and sales. So actually, that was a much easier shift than say with Costa, where actually primarily our drinks are our coffee, and that's where our sales go. So we've got to take our customers on that journey to try and improve reuse, to try and improve how many people sit in store, to think about those environments where we're at in terms of universities and try and start to create practical solutions. There are opportunities in closed environments where you could have a reusable cup that could be circulated, but how would you actually create that on the street? So I think it's actually it's looking at the different systems.
We're 2 years on from our inquiry, and we've still got the industry asking the exact same questions. I think you're behind your consumers. I think people. I was in a coffee shop the other day, and I sat there and was like, 6 reusable cups have come in, and I was like, everyone was holding them, and I thought, gosh, part of what we did as a committee was get this behaviour change, and I felt a little moment of happy satisfaction, which, let me tell you, as a politician right now, is a rare and precious moment. Although, talk to me again on Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. We'll see how we are. I think also this argument against the latte levy. We said it should be hypothecated. We said it should go into on the go collection. What happened with the Chancellor was Blue Planet was on. Plastics are a big issue.
Treasury
Blue
took
Planet
it down
was
a
off.
different road.
They've kicked it down the road. They haven't done the mandate for the tax on virgin plastic. They haven't done the mandate for 30% recycling. They're waiting till 2022 for doing that. And we've got Coca-Cola saying we can't actually source the recycled plastic that we want to use. So until you underwrite the market, until you penalise the virgin and that sounds rude, penalise the virgin product and make profitable create a market for the recycled product, you're going to end up. It's all just talk.
But I think that's the point. Is we have got a market for the recycled product. I think one of the really, really critical things about cup recycling these days is it isn't a product that has no value. It's a product that already has value. So if you speak to James Cropper, you speak to DS Smith, you speak to Ace, they're not taking these cups for the PR value. They're taking it because it's valuable material for them, and they're offsetting virgin material. And actually, there is already a cost value to that material. We've added a further amount on that of £70 on top of the 10 to £70 that you'd achieve from the reprocessors, because actually that starts to drive it economically from being at the same level of general waste to actually making it to a mixed recycling level, which actually makes it economically valuable for universities, for offices to actually start delivering this. That's what has to go into the market.
I just had a question because actually, and this is probably somebody will be able to answer this. From when I was doing my research last year about coffee cups that were actually printed mistake ones, so they were pre-consumer.
Yes.
They were going through the system, and they were getting the paper pulp that they were getting back was used for the inside of carpet rolls, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the plastic is used for something else.
It is.
And Cropper have now brought out the extract paper, which is a paper designed for designers. That's a pre-consumer.
That's post-consumer. That is post-consumer material. So the cups that come from our stores, the cups that we're recovering, all go up to James Cropper, and they're sent into packaging for Lush. They're sent into high street bags for a chain that I'm not allowed to mention, with a yellow bag. And they are going to, and essentially it's offsetting virgin sustainable material that would have had to be bought from the market.
Yes. And those trees are sustainably sourced in the beginning. So.
Okay, thank you. Can I just bring this gentleman in before he loses the will to live? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Mainly first for Oliver, really, but then open up to the rest of the panel. Oliver, you actually supply crockery as well as paper cups. Okay?
Yeah.
And over the years of the boom of the high street, which is actually one of the very few things in the economy in the high street that's being successful, we mustn't forget that. You can give all the coffee shops a bad time as much as you like. The rest of the high street and the retail sector is having a bad time. The coffee sector is one of those that's actually holding the high street together. But based on that growth, is when I go into your store, I feel safe. So when I have a cup of coffee, I know that the crockery is clean. If I take it out, I know the paper cup is clean. From a corporate responsibility point of view, what guarantees you're going to have when someone comes and uses a reusable cup? They're not going to be ill the moment they walk outside your door, because it may be that cup has been in the bag for 5 days. Does that concern you as Costa, that you no longer control the drinking vessel that your drink is being used by, And what's your thoughts about how we're going to resolve that moving forward?
I think in terms of the whole reusable cup piece, I think we have very clear guidance to our teams that actually the cup has to be clean and the cup has to have a lid on it from a health and safety point of view. And actually our teams are fairly comfortable with that. And I think it's the right thing to encourage the reuse piece. Yes, there may be a risk that the consumer might have a dirty cup, but fundamentally that's their cup. They will take responsibility to keep it clean. Our view is we should absolutely encourage reuse. However, there is obviously use of paper cups, and that's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's a very good point you make around the high street element as well. The high street is struggling at the moment. And actually, coffee shops are bringing people into high street. I know from my own hometown, the high street was really, really struggling in Wantage. And actually, when they brought Costa in there, it brought people into town because they came to meet their friends and they started shopping. So I think let's not forget the success of the high street. But that's not to take away from the fact that we do have a responsibility to do the right thing, which is exactly why we've done the right thing.
Oh, you
from a
took
coffee
that
cup
compliment
so.
and you milked it. Love it, love it, love it. Is there any example anywhere in the world of what you're talking about, of a reusable causing a terrible... Sorry.
Oh, certainly Public Health England have raised...
The thing is that if you use a crockery, it's being sterilised.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Right, all
What's
I'm
the
saying
example?
is, Lucy, for yourself, you go in and you've now got your reusable cup that you carry in your bag all the time.
Yeah.
Okay? Costa have no control how clean that is. You do.
Yeah.
If you become ill and seriously ill and end up being in a hospital, are you going to blame Costa?
But are there
if
any
you're ill?
examples of that happening?
No, I'm just saying it potentially could happen because up to
Right.
now we're taking it for granted that the lack of reduction in cross-contamination of people being ill by drinking coffee, and it also could be food to go, because it's coming out of a clean product. There's no cross-contamination. The moment you put a reusable cup,
I
it's
understand
then down to the ownership of the user.
I understand the concept.
But the corporate responsibility of someone like Costa could be quite what it could be a different situation for them.
Yes, so Sophie's saying here, and maybe you can say it on mic, about how the supermarkets are invited.
Some supermarkets now will invite you to bring your own Tupperware in to have put your meat in, raw meat. So clearly, it's not. I think there's a kind of. I think there's such demand on the consumer side that there's actually an acceptance of the risk.
Yeah,
I'm not clear how milk can make you ill. To be honest, I mean, I've had all sorts of dodgy products hanging around in the back of my cupboards, and I've
learning a lot about you today.
Well, it's the difference between moving between two houses and trying to minimise food waste. So I've always got a sort of bottle of off milk in the fridge, and just on the turn. And I've worked out various methods to minimise that food waste. But if you bought a dirty cup into Costa or any coffee shop, hot water, coffee, you can't get ill from that, and a bit of milk. I think I've probably had quite a lot of sour milk in my life. It's not.
I think the honest answer.
It's not going to be E. coli. No. It's not going to be entamoebas. It's not going
fundamentally, if there was a particularly bad cup, then our team do have the ability to refuse if they have to. If we felt
never
fundamentally
exactly,
we never would. But I guess the point is that control is in there. So
Okay.
I'm not massively concerned about that bit. But I think it's
the point I'm making here is that we take for granted that the cross-contamination and hygienic element, crockery, as well as disposables, okay?
Okay, but
we're taking it for granted because it's always clean.
Okay, we need to move on. You made your point, thank you. I just feel like I don't want to end on sour milk, like generally. So, I'm sorry we don't have time for a question, but I want to just get one really snappy answer. When the waste resources strategy appears, whenever that is, what is the greatest thing that could be in it?
We need to kickstart the UK recycling and reprocessing industry, keep more of our waste onshore in the UK, and encourage more businesses to use more recycled product.
I want to see action and more demonstration of ideas, and I think Simply Cups as a group has the ability, because you are the whole value chain of one particular product effectively, has the opportunity to trial things that are very different and very future facing, and I want to see that happening more in the UK.
Okay, Adrian?
Cups are a lead product in a whole eating culture on the go. It's creating a roadmap for others to follow that will help resolve the recycling issues that on the go generally faces. I'd like to see the PRN reform coming out of Waste and Resources to share that across all packaging on the go.
And I'd kind of reiterate that. I think that it is very much about actually getting clear funding for actually driving the infrastructure and actually communication of on-the-go recycling and actually starting to push that. But also it was really great to see, I think it was yesterday, we actually saw some investment into the plastics side of things, actually looking at new technologies that will actually start to look at bioplastics and actually driving that piece forward as well, because there's a great opportunity for actually that kind of side of things as well.
Okay, thank you very much to our panel. Wish we had longer, we don't, but please give a round of applause to our panel.
No, that's fine. Sorry. Again, yeah, look, I could have listened to that. It's fascinating stuff. Again, a huge thanks to all the panellists for coming along, and a huge thanks to Lucy. What was a great keynote address. We are slightly behind schedule, but I don't think that's an issue because, as I said, I think that was fascinating stuff. So we're going to reconvene at 1:45 to look at the second session. There should be drinks and stuff, I hope, when this door opens outside. Yeah, tea and coffee. Yes, in crockery.
In crockery. Take post-consumer now.
Yeah.
So packaging
Driven by their end product. They're not going back into the food chain.
What's the biggest issue for us? Liquid in the process kind of runs out. So
Yeah.
it's kind of dry.
Yeah.
The plastic protects the fibre. So you don't want to, and this might be different. Before, we didn't really have a throughput of material. Now we can turn around material.
Yeah.
So it's not
Trying to work out some
right. We're doing about 25.
Cheers, mate. That's right, no problem.
So quickly we can turn it around. I think secondly what we've done is we've taken, because the biggest problem for us is the stuff stuck in the straws and everything like that. We've taken that out.
That's the wrong way.
You look glowing compared to everybody else. I look very ill. Go away.
Problems there.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's fine. That's good.
I don't know exactly.
What's the AKGs, you can't do them, so I cover some of them. Yeah, not ideal, and then like someone didn't turn up in time to get mic'd up, but I think we got there.
have any questions or if anything kind of pops up and you'd like to challenge us. Last session was really challenging, go a little bit easier on us than that. I really loved some of Mary's comments, and some of those will stay with me for a very long time. So in terms of business in the community and our corporate responsibility strategy, we have an aspiration to leave the world in a better place than how we found it. And in order to do that, we are structuring our corporate responsibility around 9 commitment areas. We see ourselves first and foremost as an employer. We have 425,000 people worldwide working for us. Secondly, we see ourselves as a service provider, so that's actually us serving our clients and working with our suppliers. And then thirdly, we see ourselves as a really large organisation, so as a corporate citizen, if you like, in terms of the things we do. Standing on a global stage, what is it we want to influence? What do we want to change? How do we want to improve the world? In terms of how plastics sit within Better Tomorrow 2025, we have our waste targets that are on the screen here behind me. And what they show you is that we have a high aspiration to have 90% of our waste reused or recycled by 2025. That's 70% by 2020. And also we want to see 100% of our sites really systematically tackling food waste by 2025. So that's about actually deploying a shared approach to food waste reduction. We are working with an American company called LeanPath, so we are trying to deploy WasteWatch powered by LeanPath. I think if you work in our industry, you'll know that LeanPath is one solution, Winnow is another. It's just about getting a shared solution so that we can actually collectively have an impact on food waste. So What I wanted to also do was just tell you a little bit about our progress to date, and I suppose I'm slightly shy about this because, you know, we've already heard people talking about actually straws isn't just the issue, but straws and stirrers were something that really came up quite strongly in the public consciousness as something that was solvable, and we heard that message and we said actually that is solvable. So in May what we did is we banned the uses of plastic straws and stirrers from our business. We recognised that was, you know, a first step actually, and what we want to do and what we said at that point is that we also want to remove polystyrene from our business by 2020 and also remove single-use plastic bags by 2020. But the thing that really kind of stays with me from the last session is that this isn't going to just be about business. You know, if we have 12 years to sort stuff out, it has to be about business, it has to be about government, it has to be about consumers. So a gentleman made a point about cups coming in dirty. And, you know, I think there's a tendency to kind of go, well, sure, that's okay. But actually, that was a really big deal for our business. It was kind of like, well, who's responsible then for cleaning the cups? Is it our baristas? Is it the individual? And, you know, how is that going to be worked out? And I know that sounds like, well, were there any examples? No. But there don't need to be any examples, because when you're talking about business, business is extremely risk averse and they want to take action in a really cautious way a lot of the time. So these sorts of things have to be figured out before action can be taken. Now, in some ways, if government push through policy and legislation and consumers demand and pull it through, you get more pressure. And we got more pressure, and that's why it's easier to move at more of a pace. But I just wanted to make that point that it's never going to be just us kind of saying we're going to do something. It has to be a kind of, I suppose, a perfect storm. And I suppose that's what I'd say this is on plastics. We have a consumer desire because of Blue Planet, because of Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, and because of increasing understanding, actually, that plastics and packaging, yes, but also diets, meat consumption. The choices we make as individuals are actually having a massive impact on the climate, and people are more attuned to that now. And so they're putting pressure on us, the businesses who serve them, to do something about it and to tell them how to behave, if you like. So there is some pull from consumers. It's not just about consumers making their own choices. We need to nudge them towards better choices as well. So sort of within that perfect storm that we were able to take action. I just wanted to also share with you some of the materials we created to, I suppose, share the message. And these resources were for our site managers to put their own messaging in, as you can see, so they could adapt them as they needed to. But the idea was to have really bold communications that would help people to understand what it is we're trying to do. And the BuzzFeed video talked about, it's not about recycling actually, it's about reducing your usage. And I think everyone in this room knows the waste hierarchy actually, and it is about thinking about your disposable usage. So when we actually brought the proposal to our business about removing plastic straws and stirrers. It wasn't about get rid of these plastic straws and stirrers and now use some wooden ones. It was actually, what are we using these items for? And do we actually have to do a like-for-like replacement? And I think the argument we've been making, I've got my colleague Simon Mussett, who's our head of waste here as well, the argument we've been making is that it's not about a like-for-like replacement. It's actually about saying to people, you can change your behaviour slightly, in terms of what you need those items for. So that's kind of the big picture, how plastics and waste sits within our corporate responsibility strategy. I'm just going to hand over to Emma now, and she'll tell you a little bit more about our experience with GSK.
Okay, thank you very much. So my role in GSK is working for Sodexo, but I deliver programs and support site leads and support the change management process. So as part of our partnership with Simply Cups, we have deployed a new Simply Cups offer into a site called Where. And the way we did that was in working in partnership. So we work closely with the GSK sustainability teams. As we're all talking about, there's a groundswell of desire for people to talk about recycling sustainability more. And so it's perfect time for us to propose to GSK another opportunity to manage our waste streams more appropriately. So we launched the offer. We used Simply Cups branding, worked in partnership with the project team, did a communication strategy, and we've piloted on the site as an experiment. So our audience within GSK are scientists, they're innovators, they like to challenge the norm, they have a desire to learn more and to change the way we approach things. So it's a really good testing ground for us. So we did launch the scheme in Where in October. Just see if I got this one. Pardon, maybe. Ooh. So our progress to date, so when we launched it in October, slow burn for a little bit, but we were, by the sort of middle of November, on around 34% recycling, and this is the coffee cups we're producing in our outlets. They are going into the Simply Cup stream. We are now, in the first week in December, at 56% on the volume of cups being produced. And this has come really quickly to our audience in GSK to demonstrate that they do believe in it, it works, and we're closing it down. But it's also in partnership with a number of other ways of managing our waste. So employee engagement, putting the bins in the right place. So it's about having the infrastructure in place so people can, the ease to dispose of the coffee cup. People know it's the right thing to do, but they may not go out of their way to do it. So we had to be really strategic where we place the bins and how we are going to ease the customer into this process. We do also, as well as the Simply Cups, we truly advocate for a reduction and encourage people to reuse and recycle. So through all our coffee outlets, we have a reduced price as well. So when you bring your reusable cup, you get an incentive there as well. So, and the conversation will just grow and grow with GSK on where we can go with this. So we're piloting it in Where, and then we move to all the UK corporate sites in the new year. So this is the biggest single contract we have, Sodexo has, is with GSK, so it's got global reach. So it's very exciting to partner with them and with Simply Cups on this solution. Okay? So I think I don't have much else. Is there any questions?
Do you know where the other 66% of the cups go?
Yes. So we also manage all the waste streams for GSK through their offices. So we are seeing in the DMR, so we do have contamination, and one of the beauties of reducing the cup and the liquid from DMR will improve our DMR through the business, and they're going to general. They are being disposed of in site. These sites are waste producers. So we provide the coffee cup out of the coffee outlets, and then we pick it up off the floor. So you have a very clear system where it's going.
Just too blooming lazy to put the cups in the right place.
Yep, there's an element of that. There's also, I think it's also, people do feel the corporate responsibility and desire to do the right thing, but it's like the lunchtime rush. You have a very limited time. You see the bin on your way out, that's where it goes.
Martin, did you? Yeah, sure. In the main, it was for Edwina, actually. You're talking about closed environments. I know you operate some coffee shops in the ground floors of various buildings open to the public, but generally it's closed environments. So surely in a closed environment, there shouldn't be, if nothing is leaving the building, should there not be, is there any reason to ban anything?
I'm sorry, would you mind?
Well, because you said you were getting rid of certain types of packaging, you mentioned polystyrene, EPS, etc. But if everything is staying within the environment...
Well, I think what we perceived was that there was an opportunity to remove polystyrene because we feel that there are other packaging options available. So that was what the decision was based on. It wasn't necessarily about whether it was a closed scenario or not, to be honest.
Right, I just thought, we're talking about something where there is a solution for that, if one wanted to recycle it, therefore it's like, all the other things, you can just put them together and deal with them.
I just think on that, just from a personal perspective, there's got to be a market for it. Everyone
Oh,
can
there is,
recycle
there is,
anything.
but it's-
The question is
yeah.
there a market as well? So we need scale to collect. I think that's the major issue in a lot of this. Sorry.
Yeah, he's better at answering this question than me.
Okay. Just grab that.
Yeah. Cool.
Many thank you. So round of applause, please. I think that case study is a great one, that it goes to show that, look, increasingly at the start we have resistance whether people would adopt systems within closed environments. To get to over 50% in such a short space of time is absolutely phenomenal. And if we replicated that across every large corporate business in the UK, then we dwarf that to a 25 million figure. In reality, that would be nothing. So I think the key thing from that is, through engagement, we're not saying it's easy and it takes time, but actually once you set the model up, and I'm sure now, I'm not putting words into your mouth, but I'm sure other Sodexo sites will see the achievements of GSK, and it'll be a lot easier for them to take that decision. So fantastic, and thanks again for coming and speaking and sharing that. Moving on, I said collaboration is key. Collaboration is not only key with businesses, but collaboration is key to win the hearts and minds of the general public, and I think we cannot underestimate the power or the extent of behavioural change that is required here. And I think probably behavioural change is one of the key things when we get the system right that will reinforce that system. In terms of commercially, one of our biggest issues is we have a lot of people all over the country wanting us to offer the Simply Cup system, yet we don't have the route density to make it commercial. Now, our ambition is to be a national provider, and so therefore setting up in new territories sometimes needs a bit more of a push than simply growing organically. So I'll let Derek from Keep Scotland Beautiful tell you more, but we've now been speaking with Scotland as a key objective. We've had a lot of inquiries from Scotland that we have to date been able to service for those very reasons. So I was delighted probably over a year, 18 months ago to start speaking with Derek and finding out how we can collaborate. Now we're receiving a support from a lot of other people in the room, how we can make that happen. So I'd like to welcome Derek to the stage to share more. So welcome, Derek.
Good afternoon. Thanks for that introduction, Peter. It's good to be here to talk about this collaborative initiative that we are taking forward in partnership with Simply Cups. Before I do that, though, as someone who's pretty up to date with litter and public behaviour around that in Scotland, it's just to follow on from the comments that we received at the panel, just to let you know that behaviour change is key. And I know that there was some discussion there in the panel about litter not being important, and it is fundamental about throwaway. The investment in the UK currently, non-government sources, to shift behaviours and communicate with the public about the throwaway behaviour is less than £1 million. So just hold that thought in terms of what things like deposit systems and other systems that are multi-million. In fact, we've got virtually no investment going into change behaviours. This might be, therefore, something to get interested in. This is really fancy stuff as well down here. It's very helpful. So you probably know Simply Cups. You maybe don't know who KSB are. Keep Scotland Beautiful is a registered Scottish charity. We employ about 60 people and we're based in Stirling. We've been around for nearly 60 years. We're the leading non-government organisation concerned with litter prevention, with recycling, behaviour change and campaigns. And for example, we manage the National Cleanliness Index work in Scotland, undertaking about 16,000 surveys across all local authority areas. So we've got a very keen understanding of the scale of the challenges faced by throwaway culture, and our advice is sought by everybody within the public sector and our government, which is obviously a good place to be. In terms of single-use cups, we got started talking to Simply Cups, as Peter says, about 15, 16 months ago after a project that we ran in Glasgow called Sip Don't Tip. You'll find that on our website, where we wanted to bring attention to the fact that there were virtually no cups being recycled at all, and there's an urban myth of them not being recycled, and we wanted to inform the public. Cups are quite prevalent as a litter subject, present in 38% of sites surveyed in our national audit and in 70% of Scottish roadsides, so it's very visible. And there's been an increase in that volume since 2015, year on year. We also know the public are confused about recyclability. We know that from many surveys. And the fact is that the number of cups used in Scotland is probably more than double than we originally estimated. Zero Waste Scotland's figures have said it's now heading towards 500 million. Clearly not a place where we want to be. And if we're going to increase the number of outlets selling coffee, when we need to anticipate more cups in use, clearly. So we're going to launch the Glasgow Cup movement. We believe this has the potential to be the largest behaviour change initiative of its kind so far tried. It's going to be a flagship collaboration, and it's going to be a whole city collaboration involving as many stakeholders and partners as is possible. And why Glasgow? Well, Glasgow is Scotland's largest city. It's famed for its culture, its history and its people. It's a can-do place. Glaswegians are very proud, and it's probably the kind of city that would embrace the principle of taking on a campaign like this. In a recent city centre bin audit, for example, nearly 48% of all drinks waste was disposable cups. And we know from the inquiries that we get that people want solutions. So taking this programme and this campaign to the city will ensure that the initiative can be propelled to the forefront of political and public minds, and the public themselves can start to see a visible solution. So we have a simple ambition. It's not a complicated campaign. We want to inform the public, educate, inspire, empower people to do the right thing. And we need to have a system in place that allows businesses, organisations, agencies who wish to participate to get their cups collected, whether that's a retail facility or an office, to join the campaign and turn thousands of cups that are currently heading into landfill into a viable resource. We certainly want to try and make the public think differently, and we'll push to do that. The initiative sits within our wider work of engaging with the public on promoting sustainable consumption and reuse. So for a charity that's focused on environment, we think this sits well in partnership with us being the voice of the campaign and the issue, working with a whole range of stakeholders. And as Peter said, we've been working with Simply Cups, but we are delighted that Scott Waste, one of Scotland's larger waste management companies, will be doing our cup collection system, and DS Smith will be arranging for the cups to be hauled and taken to recycling facilities. It wouldn't be possible without funders. If you see your name on the list, well done. Thank you very much for buying in inverted commas, to what we're trying to achieve. If you're not on that list and want to be involved, please do get in contact with KSB or with Peter, or indeed anybody that you see on that list, to see if you can join in. The collaborative effort still requires a little bit more funding to get us to the target budget that we've set, so there is space for other people to be involved. And this is a lightening of the load, so it's not one company funding all of this. You can see there's a spectrum there, and that means that, you know, the greater number we have, the more impact we're going to have, the better chance we have of getting the public to change their behaviours. And I should say that the focus of this is not simply on-the-go consumption. This is also about the number of closed environments that we have in Glasgow, which includes not only our offices and our public buildings, but our museums and galleries, our transport hubs, and universities and colleges. So a whole range of target sites. And working with our partners, which we've identified as our funding partners, we'll also be able to access through them the reach and impact that they can carry to their customers. Some of the stakeholders are on that list on the screen already that have already said in principle, yeah, we want to be part of this, usual suspects. So great to see the Chamber of Commerce, Scottish Council for Development and Industry, Glasgow City Council, who will make this part of their circular city ambitions in relation to their policy. ScotRail, Network Rail, Strathclyde Bus and Transport Services and the NHS are an important partner too. So absolutely everybody that has relevance to this, we will be trying to get involved. The campaign is going to be delivered in 3 phases over the course of 2019. Launching in early January, we think with the support of the Scottish Government, they are very interested in being part of this, so that's political support is vital. The key principle in the messaging will include things like being part of the movement, so it's getting into the hearts and minds of the public in particular, moving people to change the way they think, moving them to change their habits, moving them to do something good. We want to try and make it cool, so we want people to feel being part of the movement is the cool thing to do, not being part of the movement is the uncool thing to do. And you can fantasise about what that might mean to you, but we certainly think it's the peer pressure that might come with this is something that we will look to build on. The first phase will be a general promotion and cascade of information through choreographed communications plan. We're going to be signing up people. We've already got people signing up already to be part of this. And this will include the chains, retailers, independents and venues. We will be with the city leaders in the new year, who will also be rolling this out to their key contacts and their key networks, and also with trade associations. And a digital platform will be a feature. Social media is going to play a big part in the communications that will take the life of the campaign. In the second phase, we will begin most of our above-the-line activity in terms of behaviour change interventions, and we're going to have a push to the business community. This is where we will be knocking doors and making sure that everybody that wants to be a part of this can be a part of this. It will complement existing waste management arrangements, and where businesses have got their own independent system set up, we'll be asking them if we can collect their data so that we have information that we can reflect back on at the end of the year. The important thing for KSB, and I dare say for quite a number of people in this room, is to test out whether or not this works. So by evaluating effectively in partnership with the University of Strathclyde, we will do a deep dive to make sure that all the interventions, all the activities, the promotions, the communications, and the system that we implement has been successful or otherwise. There should be lessons learned from this, and we will be making that available. The key trial period for the data collection will be from April to September, so a 6-month period where we will be giving close scrutiny to everything that happens on the ground so that we can produce a final report in January 2020, which hopefully will help businesses inform future strategy. Simple ways to get involved. Use your connections to help promote the Glasgow Cup movement. It's going to be the first cup movement in the world, so it'll be the best of the worst. Well, let's hope it's the best. We still need service stations, convenience stores, supermarkets to declare an interest. They're absent from the conversations at the moment. We've an opportunity to unite and lessen the confusion for the public. So a single message is going out there, which will surely be good for the public. The message that cups can be recycled will be featured clearly, as well as the push to reuse, which is also quite obviously important. You can drive engagement with this through your supply chain, so you can influence your customers and the people you work with. And we want to help the findings, we want to share the findings so that we can help future policy decisions, and therefore we arrive at the right things as solutions for longer term and not some of the knee-jerk stuff that is discussed from time to time. So, in conclusion, it's coming, it's going to happen. This is the first public declaration that the Glasgow Cup movement is going to take place from early January. It is going to be the largest intervention of its kind that we've undertaken to do in terms of public engagement. We have the political interest from the National Government, which is key. The Scottish Government have also formed an expert panel in single-use plastic and single-use items in particular, and they're interested in receiving information from me about the Glasgow Cup movement. So we may well have insight from inside the government's think tank. And it has the potential to be an exemplar and rolled out across the rest of the UK. It's not complicated, as I said, it's not expensive, but it does work when there is a charity that's trusted by the public, leading the messaging, and businesses that are actually prepared to commit to work with the system. So I commend it to you. It's something, if you haven't already found a way or thought of a way to maybe resolve some of the challenges, that Glasgow is a good place to start. And I hope you look on with interest in it and part of the solution. Great way to end. I happily take a couple of questions, and I'm rushing out the door to get a flight, I'm afraid. So.
I was interested on the slide of the first rollout. You've got a piece of activity or an intervention going on in the city centre, I think you described it as. What can you tell me about
So the plan is that we will do some nudge interventions at scale involving a variety of there'll be potentially a flash mob, but what we're trying to do is to make sure that we maximise the public exposure to this through communications and particularly media interest. As Lucy said, she needs to see things at scale. So we've got some ideas that will stop the traffic, literally, and bring public attention to this.
So it ties in consumer engagement, education and the media?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Derek Michael from the Socialist Network. It's a very good start, and obviously we're one of the partners with you. I'd like your personal opinion regarding peer pressure behaviour. Do you think the fining level of litter is where it should be, which could contribute in actually changing this behaviour in Scotland?
That's a complicated question, and I could inform me about it, but the quick response is that
in your opinion?
It really isn't going to matter how much fines we put onto this, because the courts don't enforce. That's the problem, is that there's not whilst the people are given fixed penalty notices, the courts won't process the fines. So local authorities have stopped. I know that Kingdom are doing some work for local authorities, and that's quite controversial down south. They're not in Scotland. But I think the punitive measures go hand in hand. We're currently discussing with the government the principle of it being a road traffic offence to have litter coming out of a vehicle, and it's the vehicle driver that currently is responsible. Sorry, is not responsible. We want to make the vehicle driver or owner responsible. So the car registration number is a way to bring fixed penalties, for example, for roadside litter. I think the punitive measures are part of the story, but it was been said earlier, 48% of people in Scotland admit to littering. So that's 1 in 2, so that's half the room here will at some point have done something. There isn't a type, and the behaviours are just lazy bastard stuff. Simple, can't walk 5 yards to a bin, don't care, don't give a shit. I mean, that's really the bottom line. Yes? Good, come and see me then. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, Derek, and hope you get your flight. No worries. Well, moving on. Here we go. I actually didn't think it was me next, but it is me next, so therefore, there we go. Okay, not a problem at all. So what I want to do is very briefly just give a bit of a recap on the progress of the scheme in 2018 and our really plans and our vision for 2019 and beyond. Today we were delighted to release our latest annual report, which will frankly kind of summarise and provide a bit more detail of what I'm going to say in the next few minutes. So if you haven't picked up a copy as yet, they are available. They will be, an electronic version will be available on the Simply Cups website very shortly, and you'll be able to download that in a PDF. But like I said, that will summarise a lot of these points we're going to make here now. In terms of the scheme growth, it's been a great year. We can always say we need to do more, but scheme membership over the last 12 months has doubled. We've now got over 150 businesses, small and large, education facilities, and retailers, part of the scheme that contribute to that 25 million cups. We are obviously, as previously announced, at 25 million cups per annum, which is validated through the Valpak scheme. All our reprocessing facilities are registered to the Valpak scheme, and therefore that will provide complete transparency of the cups we are recovering on the marketplace. And that, for us, transparency and credibility has really been the foundation of Simply Cup. So we're more than happy to share with you what we're doing. The Valpak scheme to date doesn't include plastic cups. We mustn't forget that we are also offering the solution for plastic cups as well, but we will look to provide our own data for that in due course. I think if we looked at targets, well, the targets is we need to do much more, and we also, in doing much more, we need to look at the long-term systemic issues and understand what the landscape's going to look like moving forward. I think there's a lot of change ahead. We need to collaborate more. We need to increase membership. And we'd like to put some sort of rough targets in for when we're standing here at this point of next year to be in a position where, obviously facilitated by things like the Glasgow Cup movement, we've got over 300 members and we're recycling over 50 million cups. And I think we see that as a minimum, not as the end target. In 2014, there was a real need to provide a launch event as part of our membership package. To be frank, no one knew that cups weren't being recycled, and so we had to stand there for an hour telling people that they weren't, whilst they continually told us they were. The landscape has changed much differently, and I think whilst we would still promote that the launch event, as we've seen with GSK, is the best way of engaging with consumers with a big bang on day one, what we've decided to do is we decided to remove that from the standard membership package. So what we're now looking to do is offer a range of launch events in a gold, silver, bronze category that people can buy off the shelf, whether that's when they first launch the scheme or whether they want to relaunch throughout the year. So with that being optional, that's given us the opportunity to actually reduce the costs of the membership. So with the name Simply Cups, what we want to always try and do is keep things simple. And with that in mind, what we are looking to do moving forward is to kind of rationalise the membership scheme. Moving forward from January the 1st, these will be the new rates, and there will be a consistent rate year on year. Previously, we had an increased year one rate to cover the launch event. Obviously, we don't need that now. And so everyone, what they pay in year one, they will pay every year thereafter. We've also simplified the categories. We now have two types of membership available. Suppliers, the people who make and supply the cups, and the users, the people who use and discard the cups. So we can't break it down any further than that. We're also going to look throughout the course of 2019 to run all the memberships to a 1st of January start. That will ease the administration we go through, trying to work it out at the end of every month. But also what it may do is it may give us the opportunity to have a pool of funds at the start of the year that we can then come back and communicate how we're going to invest that over the course of the year. I'll still be very honest that we still cannot run this scheme without membership fees. It is the core of what we do and it pays for our operations. When I'm always asked by organisations, why do we need to pay a membership? What do I get for a membership? Well, without the membership, we wouldn't be here, and that's why it's that important. And it will continue to be important until we stimulate the market to that point at which the demand for products made out of used cups can fund this. So it is still key to us, and I just want everyone to kind of be sympathetic to that fact that we do need the membership and that continual support. One of the key things that we've always also looked to do is expand coverage. I think whilst we recognise that there are other regional services being offered now, what our next ambition is to be the first truly national provider. When we deal with large corporate businesses, the first question is, well, can you collect from our office in Cornwall and Land's End and John O'Groats and all over there? And we go, well, we'd love to, but we can't. But if we can build that nationwide network, partly through things like the Glasgow Cup movement, then we're on a long way to do that. I think what we'll also do next year is really focus on commercialising the postback scheme. There's always going to be a point where direct collection may not be feasible due to a remote location, or the volumes generated may not support. So that is, I think, as part of this layered approach moving forward, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So we need to work out better how we can do that and fundamentally reduce the costs for doing that. So whilst that may not happen straight away in 2019, we'll be working hard on that. Part of the new membership will be to provide a supplier and a user portal on the website, which we're looking to, again, I can't commit to a date, but we're working on now and looking to support early 2019. It will be a secure area on the website for, firstly, suppliers to go in, and it will contain data information support to enable our suppliers to better communicate the value of the scheme to their customers. So it will be fundamentally a sales aid, meaning that given that we have limited resources and can't be in every single office, but it will give people wanting to talk and promote the scheme the ability to do so with great detail. From a user perspective, it will contain a lot of the engagement material that has already worked in a number of locations and therefore can be replicated. MI has probably been the biggest question that we've had and will be a major focus for 2019. What we are looking to do is to provide individual customer access to their own MI on a monthly basis, broken down by bag collection per site, and then giving them the ability to put in a variable for how many cups they're getting in a bag to provide basically a simple bit of MI that can be printed off every week and shown to the rest of the business. What we can also potentially do that, where we're working through our supplier partners, is also do that at a supplier level as well. So a partner can say, these are the sites I've got working and this is what I'm doing. What we'll look to do, because again, the Valpak scheme means that there's complete transparency of operations, we'll be looking to replicate those monthly totals back onto the front page of our website so everyone can monitor how many cups we're collecting on a monthly basis. Which again, I think when a lot of these issues is about transparency, we've got to be better at telling people what we're doing and how we're succeeding, but also what more we need to do. In terms of international expansion, we're going to continue to grow in Australia, where we're headquartered, and obviously you heard from Rob earlier about progress being made with 7-Eleven, but also a number of other brands as well. We have some representatives here today who will be our partners when we launch in the Netherlands to cover the Benelux region in early 2019, which will be hopefully a foothold into further European expansion. So if there's anyone here who's got colleagues in the Benelux region that you think would benefit from a scheme, now's the time to get in touch. Given the focus of Expo 2020 in Dubai in a few years' time, we also we currently have an interest out there in a very similar Simply Bottles program, but one that, given the focus of sustainability around Expo, will also potentially look to expand to paper cups as well. And we're also going to follow up on initial interest that we've had from the United States, which obviously, when we start talking about volumes, are vast. But this is a global problem. This isn't just limited to the UK. And we think that would add significant scale to those operations. So I think it just leaves me to thank everybody for their continued support. And all that we do is that we ask that we continue to collaborate and fundamentally expand what is everybody's scheme to try and help, make a dent into solving this problem. So that's my bit. And I want now we talked about a programme that's happening or is going to happen in Glasgow in 2019. What we want to talk about is some collaborative programmes that have happened this year. And so what I'll do is in a moment is I'll welcome Claire to the stage to talk about a number of collaborative projects that we've been working within a defined geographical area. These, I can't underestimate the importance of even doing initial interventions because they do spiral and they do grow very quickly. That first action of doing something, as we'll hear from Claire, has really started the ball rolling in the whole of the Solent region. And what we need is those pockets of activity across the UK. That will build the route density we need to make collection viable. And so we've been delighted to work with Huhtamäki and now more recently with Bettervend and also Gosport and Portsmouth councils to collaborate within the area, but I won't say any more. I will leave that to Claire from Huhtamäki.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks. So yes, I'm Claire Molson, Marketing Executive at Huhtamäki. So I'm going to talk to you today about some of the collaborative cup recycling projects that I've been working on in the local area. So Huhtamäki, for any of you who don't know, we're a global food and packaging manufacturer. We have significant UK manufacturing, so we have 4 production sites across the UK, and we're very proud of the products that we manufacture. We serve high street operators and brands, and we're very proud of the CSR credentials that we have, working with our customers as a trusted partner and supplier on sustainability and innovation. The paper cups that we manufacture in Hampshire are made from 90% plus paper from PEFC certified sources with a PE coating and are 100% recyclable. So we've been working on cup recycling for quite some time, and we knew that we really wanted to be able to pilot a collection and recycling service to be able to collect used coffee cups from residents and local businesses. So why Gosport? Well, we have 2 manufacturing sites based there, and we're a significant employer in the area, and we like to do work within our local community. Through the planning stages, we set out 4 objectives that we wanted to achieve from the project. So we wanted to prove that paper cups are recyclable. We really feel that seeing is believing for all audiences, and that message being shared quite easily. To accelerate recycling rates through the provision of infrastructure. To raise public awareness and to engage consumers with positive recycling messages. And to prove that a collaborative approach and partnership works to provide a long-term industry approach and change. So we contacted, firstly we consulted with Simply Cups, who we all know are very experienced and easy to work with in this area. And we approached Gosport Borough Council, who were absolutely delighted and very keen to be able to be one of the first councils in the country to be able to work on cup recycling and to engage in positive recycling messages for their area, for consumers, for local businesses and residents. So we worked with them. They introduced us to the waste management company that they use, who are Abasa. And we started to talk about where the bins could be placed throughout the town centre. Where would we capture those cups? And I think someone talked about earlier about where the flow of cups would be from when consumers leave the store, where they dispose of them. So we looked at a number of strategic sites. So we have a number of on-site bins down the high street, leading from the top end of the high street down to the bottom. At the ferry port, which is a commuter hub and for commuters and for tourists from Gosport over to Portsmouth. We have bins within the cafe area, which is the library and a community hub used by lots of local residents, and the leisure centre. In May this year, it was expanded into the college in the town, where they have 3 cup recycling bins for all local students to be able to dispose of their used recycled coffee cups. We really felt it was important for us as a manufacturer of paper cups to be able to set up a scheme, to be able to learn about the operations, how it works, how to be able to communicate to our customers what they needed to do, how to work as a collaborative approach, communicate and launch a cup recycling scheme. So that's what we did. So we had a launch event in January, which was attended by Minister Therese Coffey, MP, and Caroline Dinenage, MP, who's the local MP for Gosport. Also in attendance were local operators from Gosport, Huhtamäki and Simply Cups. So it was, of course, very important for us to be able to have the ministers attend on that day, to be able to communicate and share with key decision makers messages about cup recycling, to show them that it can be done and what can be achieved by working together. The Gosport scheme continues to run very well. So it was initially set up for a trial period and is now set beyond that and is an established cup recycling scheme in the area. We've engaged with local councils, businesses, residents, and showed what can be achieved. We've received wide press coverage and fantastic PR return, but most importantly, it's acted as a catalyst in the area. Like Peter said, I think the seeing is believing, and it has really raised the number of local inquiries that we've had and Simply Cups from local public and private sector companies who want to recycle the cups that are used on site. It's led to expansion in the area, which most recently has led on to Gunwharf Quays. So for those of you who don't know or aren't from our neck of the woods, Gunwharf Quays is a premium retail outlet and a tourist attraction in Portsmouth Harbour. They're managed by Landsec, who are the #1 commercial property owner in the UK. They're a 24/7 location, and they focus heavily on sustainability, waste management and recycling, which they've won a number of UK awards for. So they're a waterside location based just across from Gosport, with over 90 retail outlets, over 30 bars, coffee shops and restaurants. They have their own cinema, hotel and marina. A tourist area, they have the Spinnaker Tower, which you've just seen, and the dockyard. And on average, there's 36,000 visitors per weekend. So Gunwharf Quays has been open for over 18 years, and in that time they've made fantastic strides in sustainability, waste management and recycling. They recycle and sort a number of material waste streams, and in 2014 they were recycling 44% of their waste collected on site. Today, that's 87% of their waste, and they've already increased that by a further 2%. They continually look for additional waste streams. They don't want to stop at that percentage. They want to increase that further, and at the moment, that's now paper cups. So as you'll hear in a second from the video, they actually saw the bins on the Gosport Ferry going across, and they got in touch. That's how it all started. And for us, it's really important for our customers, our operators, consumers, and decision makers to physically see cup recycling bins and to see cup recycling happening. It's much more powerful for people to see it in action than just words. So yes, seeing is believing. So rather than you hear just from me, this is Sean Sweeney, who's the Centre Operations Manager from Gunwharf Quays, to explain why they started cup recycling.
We knew there was always another opportunity for another waste stream. Well, there's always opportunities for new waste streams. One of the areas we thought was coffee cups, but because we produce so many through our coffee shops and bars and restaurants on the centre, but we didn't know if they could be recycled. And it was just timely that I was watching a programme on telly about some mills that were recycling coffee cups, and thinking, we can do this. And then within a couple of days, a member of my team said to me, was I aware that there's coffee cup recycling bins in Gosport supported by Simply Cups and Huhtamaki? And I said, no, we need to look into this. And where we are today, fantastic relationship with Huhtamaki and Simply Cups. And we've now got 10 bins on the centre for the cups, for the lids and for the liquid disposal. And in the first 3 weeks, we collected 125 kilos of coffee cups, which equates to just over 18 100-litre bags. And it's been great for us, absolutely fantastic. Well, setting up with Huhtamaki and Simply Cups was very easy. One, because of the people involved in both those organisations, and two, because of the price, and it's really cost effective.
So Gunwharf Quays is the first centre in the Landsec portfolio to roll out this initiative, and they've already said it really is stage one for them. They're already looking at further stages and developments that they can further accelerate the number of cups that they collect on site. So they're talking about engagement with the brand partners that they have on site to see how that they can collect cups from back of house as well as through the bins throughout the centre. The value for Gunwharf in adding cup recycling to their portfolio is that they continue to integrate sustainable practices through their site. They continue to sort and manage other wastes. The value for money for their brand partners on site who pay a service charge to be there, and deliver value to their guests and the tourists who visit Gunwharf Quays. For us and for the industry, it continually reinforces the message that cups are recyclable, which is obviously vital. And Gunwharf Quays have said that there will be learnings from this, so that they've been in operation since mid-October, and they want to be able to give it a little bit more time, keep it up and running. And then within the Landsec group, they have a best practice sharing. So they will take the findings that they've had and how they can roll that out. And we heard from Ollie earlier about how then that can be rolled out through the Landsec Group further. So in the first few weeks since it's been set up, they've had some initial learnings, which I think is good for you all to share and take on board today.
Cups that Huhtamaki provide and produce are fully recyclable, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's good to get that message out there, because I don't think a lot of people know that. And that's people looking for new waste streams. This is a real good waste stream to go down that I really thoroughly recommend it. And what we've found is that the bins that we've got now, we found that it's best to put them next to a general waste bin, because people think, oh, what's that? And they might just tend to drop general waste in, and we don't want any contamination. So we found, even just in the last couple of weeks, that putting those bins next to the general waste bins really help with the education of the education of the public for recycling, the coffee cups.
So we started in Gosport, and that continues, and recently launched in Gunwharf Quays. And there's an onward expansion, like Peter said, through the South Coast Solent region. So through other local authorities, local businesses, universities, for example. So on the back of these two, we've launched the Solent Cup Recycling Project in conjunction with Gosport Borough Council, Portsmouth City Council, Better Vend, ourselves, and Simply Cups. So it builds on the success and is a collaborative project that aims to significantly further increase the number of paper cups that are collected, recycled, and turned into new products. So if you have, or anybody watching, have customers or sites that are in the Southampton or Portsmouth postcodes, please get in touch with Simply Cups and join the Solent Cup Recycling Project. So from these projects that I've worked on this year, as I said before, we've increased with a large number of public and private sector inquiries. There is now a dedicated collection service through Simply Cups running across the area. We've increased consumer engagement. So as I touched on, the seeing is believing, seeing it in practice, and consumers have been engaged when the infrastructure is provided, with great usage and very little contamination. There have been learnings from the projects in terms of the setup, who to collaborate with, who to be involved with, how to communicate and how to launch. We've received wide press coverage and the momentum that's required to further accelerate paper cup recycling. So all of these reinforce that paper cups are recyclable, which is a continual message for us all. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. That's great, and obviously we look forward to that project growing and growing over the course of 2019 as well. We are going to be 10 minutes over, so apologies. The food and drink will be well worth it, though, so hopefully you can stay around. In fact, the food and drinks will be available until probably about 6:30 this evening, so we're going to be hanging around for a bit, so anyone who wants to stay and join us for that length of time are most welcome. Okay, looking at a purely... Looking at a circular solution to the problem that we faced when we started looking at the Simply Cup scheme, our real focus was what we need to do is we need to create and increase the value of used paper cups. That's the systemic way of doing it, and the more value we create, the more likely they're going to become a valuable resource that will be pulled out of the marketplace. It's fair to say that when we launched the scheme, we only really had the option of specialist fibre facilities where we could separate the polyethylene lining and the paper fibre. And, you know, whilst it's great that when we started, I think we were paying probably money for facilities to take bales of pristine cups. Now we can probably achieve a market rate of £125 for bale cups if we can provide them in sufficient quantities. Now, that is great. I would question that we welcome the market support, but is that enough to move the market? Is that enough to get organisations to truly invest in a different collection system or vehicle fleet to realise the value of this product? I would say it's a great start, but I think we've still got somewhere to go. But I think, you know, as the course of the collection system grows, it's going to be something that's going to be needed, paper cups or not, so it's coming. So when we had the opportunity to work with Dan from A Short Walk and the guys from Nextech, we had the opportunity to create more value. And a great way of creating value was bringing something that also supported the hierarchy by promoting reuse. So it's been great working with Dan, and it's been great to actually bring to market a product that not only promotes a reduction in the use of disposable cups, but also is a real light bulb moment. It's a penny drop moment. When someone grabs one of these R cups, they actually think, you know what, this works, and this is quite a cool product, and it engages them. So without further ado, I will welcome Dan to the stage to talk about his journey, the R Cup, and some exciting plans moving forward. Dan.
Peter, you just stole my thunder. The penny drop line. Do you read it on mine? I'm going to start with an apology, which is, I'll break the rules straight away. That was my presentation. These are the notes I made during the topical discussion. So I'm going to waver a bit. Apologies, but I feel inspired. Where's my... I'm going to talk briefly about the R Cup and development of R Cup, and I'm going to talk briefly about A Short Walk for those in the room that might not know who we are. So we've been going... It was quite interesting seeing Rob from Closed Loop and his comment in 2001 about how waste streams need to be turned back into useful products. So we started in 2003, so not long after, embarking on exactly that challenge. So as a design company, all we do is design and make and manufacture products from waste, and have been for 15 years. So we've been banging the drum, as it were, about closed loop and circularity. And interestingly, I'd say our business has been steady for 13 of those years, and in the last 2 years it's just skyrocketed. And that's not because potentially of things that we've done, it's because the market's changed. We do trade shows where we've done the same trade show for 10 years in exactly the same spot. And last year everyone was like, are you new? I don't think I've ever seen you before. And it's like suddenly eyes are open, which is great. It's been brilliant. So the R Cup. It is the world's first reusable cup made from recycled paper cups. And stealing my thunder, I'm going to call it the penny dropping device, because it isn't just a reusable cup, and I'll come on to that. I'll quickly just go through the features. The outside layer is made from reused paper cups. It's 50% cups, 50% recycled PP. Nextech, our partners, process the cups that Peter collects. Once it's in that resin state, as Nextech call it, we can take that resin and then blend that resin into other recycled polymers and turn it into an array of different products. The R Cup is kind of the first one, almost the beacon, and I'll come on to the scope we now have in terms of developing products far wider than just a reusable. Feature-wise, we've got... First and foremost, it's leak-proof. When you analyse the market and look at reusables, they're pretty much all leak. So 18 months ago, when we started looking at reusables, it was kind of, we jumped with joy, because we thought, actually, I don't think anyone's really seriously looked at reusables. So the R Cup is fully leak-proof. We utilise a mechanism, a push-push mechanism, that actually has been on the market for 25 years. It's a patent that's lapsed. It's been around for years, so we thought we'd enter the market with a proven technology, a proven mechanism, and hence it works really well. So one click and it's open, another click and it's shut. So we call it the most usable reusable for that reason. Whatever you're doing, I can't say what if you're driving, because obviously we don't drink and drive. But let's just pretend we were doing something similar to driving. You don't. Also, you've got 360 drinking, so you don't have to start looking for the hole. It's basically like drinking from an open cup. So one click, per se, you are driving, you can just quickly, easily drink and shut it again, put it back in your slot. It's thermally insulated, so it keeps a drink warm for about an hour and 20 minutes. If you did it in the lab, it's 2 hours, but in real life conditions, it's sort of an hour and 20, hour and 30. So there's some fundamental functional benefits to it. We really... those benefits, I'm just going to touch on them now. We've talked a lot today about behaviour change and all the issues that we face. And I think the rhetoric for the last 18 months has been about the issues and the problems. And it's high time we started to sort of talk about solutions. And that's what I'm keen to do. And I think product design and closed loop design is a great way of offering the public solutions. It's a real tangible way. The R Cup's only been on the market for 5 months, and we've sold getting up to 250,000. That's 250,000 people who've got the penny dropping device in their hand, which is really, really important. And that's just those that have been sold. If you look on the social media hashtags, there's millions and millions of people talking about it. It only takes one celebrity with 10 million followers to sort of put a video together, say, whoa, have you seen this? And they click it and drink from it and literally show all the paper cup. That's another 10 million people, hopefully, where the penny's dropping. I think that's the value. We talk about increasing the value of waste and paper cups. A really good example of that is typically, and Ollie talked about it, about how they've increased the value per tonne to around about £150. Once it's in that state, a paper cup is true value. Its real terms value per tonne is £15,000. So there's adding value and then there's adding value. We talked about behaviour change. I'm going to come on to the circular economy at the end because that's those notes, the ones that I probably weren't expecting to talk about, but I will. I'm really, really proud as a designer, as a product design company, that we've just won the Which Best Buy Award. The biggest thing I'm proud about that, okay, it's functionally arguably superior than other cups out there, but it just proves to people that if a product is made from waste, it's not inferior. It can be quality. And that's a real recognition of that. So I think that's really important. So that's a huge achievement for the company. It's a huge achievement for circular design. I was going to announce today as well that we've now launched an 8-ounce range. We initially launched with a 12-ounce 5 months ago. We've now brought in the 8-ounce because so many, especially independent coffee shops, were saying 8 ounce is really important. That's kind of where the market's moving. Everyone wants sort of small shots and flat white. So we've literally just brought that to the market this week, and the pre-orders for that were huge. So obviously it is in big demand. We can also brand the R Cup as well. We can do full wraparound design, full colour. The MOQs on that are really, really low, starting from 100. We can also completely bespoke the colourways. If brands and other companies want their own particular colourway, we've got that option as well. In terms of an update as well of where we're progressing for the next year, I mean, it's been a huge year, 2018, and I think it was, what I'm really proud to say was when I got up and spoke at the last conference, we were talking about solutions, whereas now we can talk about, we've got evidence, proof of a solution, which I think is really important. We're going to update our LCA because, you know, technically that needs updating every year and people forget to do that. So you do a study, but the market's changing so rapidly. We're going to update that, especially on the 8 ounce. We are moving production. Now we've stimulated the UK market, and now there is a demand. We're bringing production not just to UK, but actually hopefully to Cornwall. We're based down in Cornwall, so we're trying to set up a circular economy hub, a regional hub down in Cornwall. So it's really important then to actually bring the infrastructure and the manufacturing down into Cornwall. We're moving towards hopefully a 100% recycled content because of the food safety laws. Everything mustard you see in this cup is still virgin plastic because of food safety. So again, we're doing a project with our partners, hopefully Nextech, on looking at ways of effectively turning food grade plastic back into a recycled food grade. And interestingly, the biggest challenge with that, and we're working with Peter on this, is how you actually segregate food waste plastic. Once you can segregate it, then you've got a chance to process it. So that's the biggest challenge. Again, it comes back to infrastructure, really. And then we're going to launch a 16 ounce, hopefully within sort of Q1. The other areas, I mean, we do lots of other products that we can do out of this material. Interestingly, we've got a few other polymer waste streams that we can blend the cups with. We can do HIPS, we can do PP, we can do HDPE now, which are all three quite common waste streams within the infrastructure. So that's quite exciting. So that opens up a bigger scope of what we can start manufacturing. Interestingly, the kind of, and as much as I hate to say it, I'd like to stand here and go, do you know what, it's really clever. What we do is really clever and no one's ever going to be able to copy us. It's actually fairly straightforward from a design perspective, with the great work that people like Nextech do, where they can deliver a resin that we can put into polymers. It behaves very similar, so it will behave similar to a virgin PP or a virgin HIPS. So it isn't hard. There's clever things you have to do to try and... there are complications, but not huge complications. And the Which report is just proof that if you do get it right, then you can come up with a really high-value product. One of the interesting things is often a misconception that if it's made from recycled materials, it's either going to be... it tends to be more expensive, and we find that a lot. We do a lot of consultancy work for bigger brands when we'll go in, look at their waste streams and try and turn generally problematic waste streams into new products, because obviously it stimulates demand. So it's good that they see value in that. But there is a misconception that you can almost see the question coming and of like, well, how is it? It's going to cost more, isn't it? How much more? 10% more? 20% more? In reality, it's less. It's always less. There's two reasons behind that. Generally, recycled waste and recycled polymers are cheaper than virgin, if done correctly. So you're already onto an advantage. But two, if you involve a design company at the front end, rather than big business sourcing, because effectively that's what most businesses do, they don't really. And the cup is a good example. It's like when you actually fundamentally look at a new product from its source, you can very often then produce it and design it for cheaper. So we have countless examples of where we've gone in and been able to undercut what was currently being used, primarily, if I'm honest, because they were just sourcing it. The costs aren't huge. I mean, our design service is free, completely free. So we'll go into a design company and say, we'll have a look at your waste streams and turn it into product for you. I guess the catch is that we then try to obviously provide product for that company. So it's a fairly low risk solution, but it does work. Hence, I've got living proof. Listen, that's living proof of solutions, which is really important. I'm just going to finish, if I may, quickly on some of the words I heard today. Solutions, a visual solution, opportunities, a buzz. We need to create a buzz. There it is. Infrastructure. We need to create infrastructure. That helps with that. And I'm not talking about just this cup. I'm talking about product design in general, closed loop product design. We need to create a market for waste. There we go. I kept hearing people want this, people want that. From my experience, in 25 years of designing products, people don't know what they want. They really don't. So I think it's a slight pitiful excuse to say, yeah, but that's what everyone wants. No one wanted a Sony Walkman 5 years before they came out. You know, I think we need to wake up a bit and say, grab the bull by the horns a bit and say we can instigate change. And it's a bit of a cop-out to say this is what the people want. And the people are, to coin a phrase, lazy shits. You know, yes, they are, but they can definitely change. You know, we need to make paper cups a sort of socially unacceptable product of tomorrow, like kind of smoking is now, or even plastic bags are now. It's embarrassing to walk out with a plastic bag, isn't it? It's not about the 5p. So we need to create that, and I think we can as an industry. So I think we need less rhetoric around this is what everybody wants and sort of more about, well, actually, we could probably steer it from government level to inspiring people. So yeah, it's about the penny dropping. I urge everyone to sort of get on board with that. Come and see me at the end. I'll be on my stand. Don't make me look lonely. Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of proceedings and talking about cup recycling, and now onto the important part, which is the food and drink. So I'd like to now introduce Douglas McMaster, who we've had the pleasure of dealing with, back on our business in Australia and more recently in the UK. Douglas has very much pioneered the zero waste approach when it comes to food and drink, and he has very kindly decided to or agreed to come and put on a special menu for us today, a menu made from waste. So before I'll let him tell you that, here we go, Douglas McMaster, I'll let him introduce. That's enough from me at the end of the day as well. So thanks everyone for coming, really appreciate support, and when Douglas finishes, we'll go and enjoy his food. Douglas.
Hello everyone, I'm sure you're really hungry, so I'm going to just present a short presentation to give you a snapshot of Silo, which is my restaurant in Brighton. Silo is a zero waste restaurant, which basically means we don't have a bin. I wanted to give two diagrams to explain how we're different to an industrial food system, which is a sort of talking about penny dropping. That was for me when I realized the reason of waste. Why does waste exist? Humans, namely, but humans have used industrialism as our mechanism, as our machine. And I just, looking at the industrial food system, these things we need in a restaurant come from nature: food, materials, and glass. We eat the food, ideally. We use the materials and the glass, then goes into recycling and then landfill. Whereas what we're trying to do at Silo is everything goes from nature to nature, or an example over here. So all materials are natural when there is materials. We tried to get all of our wine in kegs, but couldn't quite achieve that because of the local availability to Brighton. So we have glass. We eat, we use, we compost. And then we turn all of our single-use glass is the only single-use material that we have in the restaurant. And so we're crushing single-use glass into powder, and we're then creating plates. This is the first prototype that was made yesterday, straight from the pottery, which is 2 streets away. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But it's just this idea of nature to nature. With the odd exception, which is a sort of feedback loop, as it were. Really quickly, zero waste, 3 sort of main pillars of how we achieve that: direct trade, whole food preparation, and then finally composting. So everything, we go directly to the source. Every single thing that we need in a restaurant, we're trading with the farmer, the origin of that food. Everything comes in crates, reusable vessels of multiple things. All of our dry goods comes in paper. Our drinks come in Cornelius kegs, poured from a tap. Things like napkins, we do use, I mentioned single use, we do use single use napkins, but obviously that goes into the composting system. Clever containers, vessels, things like this coffee back. For, your coffee's always in this really bad foil, single use. Instead, we find the right suitable containers to get everything into the restaurant that we need. The chocolate, which you're going to try very soon, we've got a pirate chocolate truffle. I say pirate because see that boat? That's the Tres Hombres. All of our 100% of our chocolate is sailed on that boat. 100% from the Dominican Republic all the way to Falmouth. My friend Abraham makes the chocolate from bean to bar, comes in paper. So non-local things are much harder to get. Zero waste, but where there's a will, there's a way. The whole food preparation. This is our flour mill. We mill all of our flour. This was the actual logo of the business. It represents a whole food preparation. When you mill flour and make it into sourdough, it tastes completely superior, and it's nutritionally superior as well. You're going to taste some of our silo-loaf that I baked this morning. Whole animal butchery. It's pre-processed meat. It's wrapped in plastic. A whole animal isn't wrapped in plastic. Fish, same principle. We make our own yogurt and cultured cream. Make our own alternative milks. Churn our own butter. You're going to try the homemade butter. We made that this morning. That's going to go with the sourdough that was baked about 8 hours ago from the freshly milled flour. This is some puff pastry. It's quite an extreme. Puff pastry takes days to make, and not only do we make it, we actually mill all the flour and churn all the butter for that puff pastry. So that particular thing is a real labour of love. And then finally the composting. So this is Bertha. Bertha eats our food waste, and then when Bertha creates compost, it goes back to the origin. It's Robin again. Upcycling materials. So every designed thing in the restaurant is made from complete waste. So taking something which has zero or little to zero value, going to landfill, we turn it into what I think, or I hope, is quite a nice space, quite a beautiful, comfortable space. This is I think, a really good example of that. Every single detail in this room was complete waste. From the felt, from the legs, from the recycled plastic tops to the coffee jars. Your canapes are going to be served on plastic bags plates made from recycled plastic bags, dipped in bioresin. Even the knife handle, I brought it today with me. This is made from waste plastic. The guy who makes these knives lives in a canal in London and literally fishes it out of the canal and forges his knife handle with the waste plastic. This machine, it crushes all of our single-use waste glass into powder. You can see we sifted off to make different things. This one is this one. And then we make powder and then make an emulsion with a powdered glass. So it's like a faux porcelain. It's extremely fine. I mean, this is quite fine, and this is the rough stuff. Please do, I'll show you all later if you're interested. Waste is a failure of the imagination is the sort of silo mantra. We like things that people think there's nothing you can do with. It's a creative challenge to turn everything that no one else wants into something precious, something delicious. Our bread waste, we make silo miso, so the bread that you don't eat today will be turned into silo miso. All the scraps of vegetables make kimchi. All the guts from the fish make fish sauce. Nothing is wasted. The food, I believe, is quite a beautiful end product, but we do so not from waste. It's a system that doesn't generate waste. This is just a funny example that I wanted to give you. We actually find things in nature which are a problem. So American signal crayfish are devastating to the fresh British waterways. And people are actively killing them just for the reasons of biodiversity in the water. But if we're going to kill it, we might as well eat it. We make this crayfish and broth. We reduce the broth down into this really intense like crayfish bisque, like the classic lobster bisque, but it's with a problem. Leave lobsters alone. Eat crayfish. We make a crayfish oil, and then there's crayfish broth, and then the crayfish. So this dish, we serve this in the restaurant, is one ingredient, and it's made from a problem, beyond waste. And then the silo book, this comes out in spring, in March, I think. I've sort of finished it. The final touches on it this week. I'm in a lot of trouble from the publisher because I'm here and I'm not doing that. It's fine. So that's silo, and just in a sort of nutshell, I think we've got one minute left. I don't like to think of silo as using waste. It's a system that doesn't generate waste. A systemic intervention. It's a really pretentious term. But so we go, our food is premium. It's coming straight from the best organic farmers around us, coming directly into the restaurant from the ground. This food is so alive. And we process it from whole, keeping its natural integrity. Almost everything's fermented, so you're actually boosting its natural integrity. There's a lot of fermented food out there. And serving it as nature intended. It's a food system that genuinely does not have a bin. And what comes into the restaurant, the only things that leaves the restaurant is full bellies, compost, and a new product. So that's silo in a nutshell. I think that's it. And I hope you're hungry. Some food outside. Thank you very much.